News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing.
With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that.
When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me for the next few hours, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bustani, and also political commentator Lynn May. In my niggle, I take on Rachel Reeves following reports that she was investigated over her expenses whilst working for a bank. Of course, every time her lot of questions, they come up with the fixing the foundations baloney.
Change our plan, not changing the conversation. Change and reform are coming. Fixing the foundations.
That's why we are fixing the foundations to better support our public finances. At my first budget in October, it was my duty as Chancellor to fix the foundations of our economy.
I'll fix her into the foundations. So is it time for her to go? Meanwhile, Foreign Secretary even David Lammy is urging European countries to do more to smash the people smuggling gangs as he meets counterparts at the Munich Security Conference. So I'm asking, do you trust Labour to smash the gangs? Head over to the GB News website and cast your vote in my poll. US Vice President J.D. Vance has blasted the UK and Europe over protest laws and immigration policies.
And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
So do you believe that there's a retreat of free speech? I'll be asking that. But before we get started, let's get your latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Nana, thank you. It's just gone 3 o'clock. These are your headlines. Thousands of people are marching to the US Embassy in London in protest against Donald Trump's plans for Gaza. It comes after the US president said he wanted to take over the territory and turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East. A counter-protest by Stop the Hate will take place along the march route near Vauxhall Bridge. The Met Police say there will be a major security operation to keep the groups apart and minimise disruption. They've imposed conditions under the Public Order Act, restricting routes, assembly areas and start and finish times. The Munich Security Conference continues today with world leaders including Olaf Scholz and Volodymyr Zelensky discussing global security challenges. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy is calling for European sanctions on people smuggling gangs and will co-host a migration roundtable with Italy. He also says he and US Vice President J.D. Vance agree Ukraine must be part of any peace talks with Russia as Keir Starmer pushes for Kyiv to join NATO. But the Ukrainian President Zelensky wasn't convinced.
This is not just madness. This is Russia's stance. A country that launches such attacks does not want peace. They don't want.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has backed Donald Trump's message to Europe, urging nations to man up and step up their support for Ukraine. In other news, a woman in her 40s has died after a shooting at a village pub in Knockholt in Kent on Valentine's Day. Kent police say she was shot at around 7 o'clock on Friday evening and died at the scene. A murder investigation is now underway, with police confirming the suspect is a man known to the victim. Officers have also found a vehicle and a firearm on the Dartford crossing linked to the incident. Elsewhere, the family of British nationals Craig and Lindsay Foreman is rallying to secure their safe return after the couple was detained in Iran. The pair, who were travelling across the world on motorbikes, were arrested in January, with Iranian state media reporting they face security charges. The Foreman's family described the situation as distressing and expressed their focus on ensuring their safety while working with authorities. The Foreign Office is in contact with Iranian officials and providing consular support. Now, 2 men have been charged after a man was attacked outside the Turkish consulate in London while burning a Quran. Footage on social media shows the victim on the ground as a knife-wielding attacker kicks him. 50-year-old Hamit Cookson from Derby has been charged with a religiously aggravated public order offence, while Musa Kadri, who's 59, faces charges of actual bodily harm and possessing an offensive weapon. Koskan is due in court today, while Kadri has been bailed until Monday. World number 1 Yannick Sinner has been handed a 3-month ban from tennis after settling a doping case with the World Anti-Doping Agency. The Australian Open champion tested positive for the banned substance clostrobol last year, but was found to have been inadvertently contaminated by his physiotherapist. Authorities had initially sought a ban of up to 2 years, but agreed to a reduced suspension after accepting Sinner had no intent to cheat. He will miss major tournaments in the US and Europe, but can return in May for the Italian Open. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Nana.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Well, we've got loads to come on the show. Foreign Secretary David Lammy is urging European countries to do more to smash the people smuggling gangs as he meets counterparts at the Munich Security Conference. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you trust Labour to smash the gangs? Head over to GB News at the website.com, cast your vote in my poll, and we'll be crossing live to central London, where thousands are marching to the US Embassy in protest against Donald Trump's plans for Gaza. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm also asking, do you believe there's a retreat of free speech in Britain? And it's a special birthday for World War II veteran Fred Jennings, as he turns 100 years old. I'll be crossing live to his birthday party in Northern Ireland. That's coming up. As ever, send me your thoughts, post your comments, gbnews.com/yoursay. So let's start with David Lammy, Foreign Secretary. He's urging European countries to develop sanctions against people smuggling gangs as he meets counterparts at the Munich Security Conference. President Zelensky had this to say earlier about Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
This is not just madness. This is Russia's stance. A country that launches such attacks does not want peace. They don't want.
Meanwhile, US Vice President J.D. Vance launched a scathing attack on Europe.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. In Britain and across Europe, Free speech, I fear, is in retreat. An offer.
Well, let's get the latest from Munich with our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, some very impactful speeches. What more can you tell us?
Yes, good afternoon, Nana, from Munich and the Security Conference, something that's been going on for decades, but it really feels like the stakes here are very high because European leaders have had a very, very worrying few days. It began with the revelation that Donald Trump had talked to Vladimir Putin for 1.5 hours the other day. Then we had the situation where the US president yesterday spent 20 minutes talking not as Europe was expecting about security, probably having a go at Europe's defence spending, talking about Ukraine, only a passing reference to any of that. J.D. Vance spent most of it basically having a go at Europe, saying that they were collectively beginning to suppress free speech, that they'd forgotten what they stood for, taking particular aim at the UK, I have to say, and Scotland specifically. And then today, a speech from Volodymyr Zelensky, let's face it, the biggest star here, in which he issued a very, very bleak warning. He said that it was time for an army of Europe. He said, I urge you to act for your own sake. He basically said that it was clear that Europe can no longer count on having the support of America. The US Defense Secretary said the other day that the US no longer was primarily focused on the security of Europe. In other words, we could potentially be on our own. And he was saying, look, Ukraine has intelligence that Russia is planning to send troops to Belarus this year. He said yesterday in a press conference that they also had intelligence that potentially Putin was planning to actually attack a NATO country as soon as next year. So I have to say there is a lot of alarm here. Now, I interviewed Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister, of course, huge supporter of Zelensky, yesterday here in Munich. He took a much more positive tone. He accused European leaders a bit of headless chickenism, as he called it. But I have to say here, he's pretty unique in the view that Europe really doesn't have too much to worry about. And just on defence spending, finally, Donald Trump called out Europe on this many years ago when he was president the first time. It's not like Europe hasn't had plenty of notice. Now Donald Trump saying everybody needs to spend 5% of its GDP. Now, a lot of countries in Europe don't even spend 2%. Now, today, the NATO Secretary General has said that countries should be spending north of 3% if they're in NATO. But our own Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who's been speaking on a panel in the last few minutes, largely about illegal migration, has merely said that the UK is committed to a pathway to 2.5%, and they'll set out that pathway in the coming months. We're currently at 2.3%. And I remember being in Warsaw last April, I think it was, with the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, when that government said that we'd hit 2.5 by 2030. Now, this government won't even do that. A lot of alarm here now that any huge rush to defence spending might potentially come rather too late.
I would not add something new from Germany.
Is my mic out? All right, Catherine Forster, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Right, so that's Catherine there. Thousands of people are marching to the US Embassy in protest against Donald Trump's plans for Gaza. This comes after the US president said he wanted to take over the territory and turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East. Those weren't quite his words, were they? He didn't really, but he did say that they would look to take the territory in some way. Joining us now live from the protest, it's GB News reporter Adam Cherry. Adam, what can you tell us? I've seen you at the protest. It's been very busy, but it looks as though it's slightly dispersing at the moment. What's the atmosphere like?
Yeah, we started here at about 1:30, although the protest itself began at midday on Whitehall. It then snaked through to Nine Elms, where we are now. This is the US Embassy in front of us. The static protest is behind me, and yeah, it is dispersing a little bit. By 4 o'clock, they have been given an order to disperse. The speakers who are currently behind me giving their speeches. We've heard from Zara Sultana, we've heard from Jeremy Corbyn saying our demonstrations will continue for as long as the occupation continues. Since we've been following this from Whitehall, I myself have seen 4 people led away by police, including one very recently, right here where we're standing. Police outnumbered and surrounded by protesters, all of whom were chanting, "Free him, don't lead him away." They subsequently took that gentleman to the police van over to my right. For those watching on television will see there's a police presence, a police barricade over there. But as I say, at 4 o'clock this is scheduled to wrap up. There was a counter-protest across Vauxhall Bridge, Stop the Hate. They were concentrated just there, a small number of them. Insults hurled back and forth, as you would expect. You often see that at these protests. We've become familiar with these in the last 18 months or so, and we saw a couple of arrests there as well. So it is calming down a little bit. You'll see those again on television, see that the people behind me are starting to leave, and it is getting a little bit quieter, but it's been a very noisy day of protest so far now.
I did somebody shouting from the sea to the river, so they've changed it. It's deeply offensive to many Jewish people, whichever way around you put it. So, and if anyone's offended by some of the banners and some of the things that we are hearing, I'm afraid, unfortunately, I can't sort of control that. So apologies to that. Adam, have you managed to speak to anybody there at the protest? And if so, what have they been saying?
Well, a lot of people are saying, get your hands off Gaza. There's a lot of socialist worker banners with the words, as usual, as we often see in these protests, from the river to the sea. There's been some chanting to that effect just now behind me. As I say, that should wrap up by 4 o'clock. The counter-protesters, Stop the Hate, were saying that these protests, or rather that Hamas are calling for a global intifada, reminding or saying Hamas are still terrorists despite the ceasefire. So that's the tempo of this, the tenor of this so far, Nana.
All right, Adam, well, thank you very much. We may catch up with you a little bit later on. That's Adam Cherry. He's our GB News reporter. He's out there in London at the pro-Palestine protest. Well, he's just tuned in. Welcome, 16 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, do you trust Labour to smash the gangs? This is GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that.
When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here
We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good afternoon. Did you have a nice Valentine's yesterday? I did. I stayed at home, fish and chips. It was great. Proper British Valentine's, yes. Fish and chips, no alcohol, maybe a little glass of red wine, I admit to. But to me, that was lovely. Very nice little treat. And lovely flowers that I sent to myself and a card. Great. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Welcome. It's time now for the first great British debate of this hour. I'm asking, do you trust Labour to smash the gangs? Foreign Secretary David Lammy is urging European countries to develop sanctions against people smuggling gangs as he meets counterparts at the Munich Security Conference. But how do you develop sanctions against people smuggling gangs? I'm confused. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you trust Labour to smash the gangs? Well, joining me now, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, and also political commentator Lynn May. Right, Aaron Bastani, I will start with you. They're saying they're going to smash the gangs.
Are gangs really the problem? I suppose that's what it boils down to, right? So if you think that gangs are the primary cause of what's going on with regards to tens of thousands of people crossing the channel every year, then, OK, that's a viable conversation. I don't really think that's the issue. I think what the left gets right in this debate is the fact our foreign policy has created tens of millions of displaced people. And then the right would say, well, whether or not that's true, we're also a soft touch. OK, so there's something
in what way, sorry, have we created displaced people?
So the war on terror, for instance, has created about 45 million displaced people, Afghans, Iraqis, etc. Many of the people who come to this country are from countries that have had wars and occupations and major political conflict.
If you went back
partly as a result of what we did. Not all, but partly.
No, I don't know whether it's true, because if you go back to why we got involved in those wars, I think in many we were attempting to be peacekeepers, sticking our nose into things that really weren't our business, frankly, because we thought that their civilization wasn't quite right, and perhaps if they were democratic like us, that if we gave them that would be a benefit. But most of these countries don't want to be a democracy.
I'll give you an example. So Libya, for instance, we got rid of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011.
I remember that, yeah.
And that was a complete disaster. And you obviously get the refugee crisis shortly thereafter. And the reason why those two things happened so closely together is because Libya became a massive entry point for people coming through sub-Saharan Africa into Europe. So my point is that stupid misstep led to significant numbers of people coming into Europe. The same with Saddam Hussein, the most secular leader in the Middle East. He was a secular Arab nationalist leader. You don't have to like the guy. I'm half Iranian. He used chemical weapons against Iranians. But the point is, when you create a failed state in somewhere like Iraq, that's obviously going to create refugees
but you're
coming to Europe.
acting as though you're sort of discounting the work of Gaddafi and saying that we've gone in and done. They created their own failed state, and then we went in thinking that we were helping.
But we got rid of it. We you know, the British RAF and the French.
But that failed state existed before we got involved. So and I don't think it's fair to
pushed it over the...
You don't think...
Well, particularly in Gaddafi, we can debate...
But aren't these people responsible in their own countries for their own behaviour?
Well, I don't think Libyans simply don't have the means to defend themselves from the Royal Air Force and French Mirage fighter jets.
But what was going on for us to even contemplate doing that, though? And
there were protests, but I mean, there are protests in all sorts of countries. There are protests in France 6 months ago, which were really hairy and loads of things were being set on fire. There's protests in all sorts of places. There's protests in Russia. There's protests in this country, not to the same extent.
I think it's too easy to blame our foreign policy on people coming across.
No, I do honestly think it's a really big part of it. Look at the people coming over the channel: Iranians, Iraqis, Syrians.
No, I think it's an easier.
Afghans.
What do you think?
I do actually agree on that point. I do think that, you know, it's a bit of a cop-out to say that we wanted to be this moral high ground of the world and bestow our morality on other countries.
Well, I think we did.
That well, no, because if we look at... We have to look that wherever we've left is usually worse. And where it's worse, we're going to get migrants coming. We have to look... What we tend to ignore is forget left and forget right. And I know that there's a lot of anger towards illegal migrants, but anybody is going to try and look for a better life. So that I agree with. However, my issue is, and the question was, do I trust Labour to smash the gangs? No, I don't trust anyone to smash the gangs because of our current law and how we uphold international law. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but maritime, us being a part of the ECHR, we're not going to be able to do anything about that because of those things. And to put things into perspective, when it comes to gangs, Lamy suggesting sanctions on People and Times, especially people from Ethiopia, have said, that region has said, those gangs come to our villages and sell us dreams, and we wish we could actually go back. They show them things on social media that, you know, you're going to live like this, you're going to live like kings, and they actually pay lots of money. I interviewed an Iranian man who paid over £5,000, and he would like to go back to Iran now because he was sold this fictitious dream that the streets are paved with gold. So the gangs are the problem, but we can't do anything about them because we uphold maritime law and we uphold all the other laws.
All right, I just want to come back to the notion that the reason why mass immigration is because how we've treated other countries. What did we leave Africa? When we left parts of Africa, we left them with a lot of infrastructure. We left Africa with the Commonwealth. So we had a Commonwealth... let me finish, sorry. So the idea of the Commonwealth was to support some of the nations that we'd invaded, also to keep some sort of control of empire, but we didn't leave them with nothing. You know what I mean? The way we left India, again, with some sort of infrastructure and some sort of thing in place, a kind of democracy that a lot of people may say is a very civilised way to live. I don't know, it depends what your perspective is. The way we leave countries when we invade them is usually in a relatively decent state. If you look at the way, say, someone like China or, say, some of the other countries will leave other countries, it's not such a good thing. So I'm thinking, if you get invaded by the UK or some of the... I actually think that... I'm not saying that, hey, it's good that you've invaded any country. But what I'm saying is, look at the way those countries have been looked after themselves after we've left those countries. I don't think you can blame the UK for mass immigration.
Well, first of all, I don't think that's the only reason. I'm saying it's a reason. And I'm talking about conflicts specifically in the last 25 years. I'm not talking about post-colonial era, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s.
But surely, how far back do you go then?
No, I'm literally saying, that's why I said the war on terror. I'm saying that foreign policy choices made by this country, the US and various allies, really since 9/11, we know that that's a number we can actually identify. About 45 million people were displaced as a result of the war on terror. Those were epic failures, and I think... It's something I think about a lot when I talk to Conservatives who are anti-refugees, helping refugees, etc. I know, again, this is not a right-left thing. There are many left-wing people who, you know, want less migration. But I say to some people on the right, I say, look, it's interesting, you don't like refugees, but you sure like creating them.
But Nana, also, if let's just look at British people are sick to the back teeth of us actually getting involved in wars, funding wars, sending ammunition and arms to other countries where there's people that cannot get certain jobs, they cannot have places to live. The politicians are not being listened to, as in, sorry, the people here in Britain are not being heard. So why are we being involved in all of these... we always support America. America has over 700 bases, and they're telling other people what to do. That's obviously going to cause disruption to those countries. You're saying Africa's better. The average salary in Congo is $2, yet we benefit from natural resources in Congo.
I think it's simpler than that, OK? The reason we have this ridiculous level of mass migration is, frankly, our own policies of immigration. So when somebody comes to this country, what are you going to give them? Oh, well, potentially we're going to put you in a nice hotel, which is a reality.
True.
I'm not making that up. Why do you think they don't want to be in France? There's a video of a guy saying, oh, he left Greece because he knows if he comes to the UK, he's going to be in a hotel. We have created this problem from our own ridiculous leftist generosity. And it's a nonsense to even say, oh, it's because we went into other countries. No, they're not. No, hold on. They're not going back to other countries. They're coming to the UK.
Yeah, can I ask
and even
a question?
the Europeans are saying, look, you're bringing them across our borders because, in the end, you're so inviting to everyone. And then the litigious system as well. You fail one appeal, you can have another and another. We're going to pay for this.
These are all... So I agree with you. It's not just one particular thing.
But to me, that's the bigger problem.
Let me give you a really strong example here. So we have sanctions on Iran. The point of those sanctions, the literal objective of those sanctions, is to collapse the Iranian economy. And when Iranians come to Europe, we say, what on earth are you doing here? And it's like, we can't put the two and two together. If there were sanctions on the UK in order to destroy our economy, to create hyperinflation, to collapse standards of living, people would leave. Of course they would. So I fail to understand why it's just not common sense politically to say, well, there's large numbers of Iranians coming towards Europe and we've got sanctions on them. Maybe there's some relationship between those two things.
Exactly. We had to take in loads of Afghanistan.
Well, no, we didn't have to, but we chose to.
But why would we not if we have been there for over 20 years and we've left it in a destructive way?
Exactly.
Why were we in answer this? Why were we in Afghanistan for such a long time with our boots on the ground?
You want me to answer that? I thought it was ridiculous that we went into Afghanistan. But that doesn't mean then, after that this mass migration is all our own fault for going to Afghanistan. People went into Afghanistan because they were trying to conflate it with something that happened with 9/11, which again seemed a very odd
20
conflation.
years.
It seemed a very odd conflation when that really wasn't the basis of it all. But we went in there, we did our thing, and then Joe Biden did an awful thing, and then the Afghanis wanted to leave. They wanted to leave because the democracy that we wanted to impose on them did not work, and many people actually wanted to go back to the original regime. So that may have caused some immigration, but the reason why is really our policies in terms of taking people in. We don't have to take people in from Afghanistan if we don't really want to.
So we should assist in messing up their country than saying, sorry that we completely messed up your country,
but we weren't
but now
trying
you
to
can't
do that.
come here.
But we weren't trying to do that.
What were you trying to do?
No, but exactly. We were trying to impose our democracy on their theocracy, and that's
we shouldn't.
We shouldn't, but we did. But that doesn't mean.
So
then
you agree that we should not be meddling, and our foreign policy is incorrect,
and not
then?
because of immigration. I just think that you should mind your own business and keep your nose out of it.
Agreed.
But not because they're all going to come here now, because this place isn't that much better. And if we had decent immigration policies, then people really wouldn't be tempted to come here either. If we didn't have things where you could use our lawyers and we're going to pay for all that, we'll give you a house and all of that, people might want to stay in their own place and try and improve that. We're making it too inviting.
Yeah,
I don't think why are we making it so inviting?
I agree with you that it's down to Iranians to make Iran a better country.
Exactly.
I agree with you entirely.
100%.
But I really think this is missed out in the wider debate because we talk about EHRC, Supreme Court, etc., all very relevant.
Yeah.
But people do not talk about the foreign policy element enough. Because if you literally look at the list of the countries where people are coming from, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Libya, it's quite obvious what's happening.
No,
and yet we don't talk about the foreign policy element.
You're saying it's obvious. What is happening?
There's clearly a part of the world where we have, you could say intentionally or unintentionally, massively destabilised over the last 25 years, and significant numbers of people from those countries have come to Europe. Look at Syria.
But why did we... Look at Syria.
I
But
mean,
they were destabilised already. The UK's intentions were good.
Libya was far better before we took out Gaddafi.
I agree, but the UK's intentions were good. So it wasn't that we went into...
Good intentions.
Well, what do you expect? OK, so if the British people hadn't gone in, so as people are being bombed and everything else, their own leader is chemically attacking them...
Why is that our business?
Hang on. What do you expect the UK if we're going to be
nothing.
some sort of... OK, so we're supposed to...
It's not our position
but hang on.
impose our democracy on other countries.
You've gone in. Why should you now be... Oh, it's your fault now. Well, you've gone in to try and help us. And now you've gone to try and help us, and now we're going to come to your country. That doesn't make sense.
Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons against Iranians and Kurds.
Yeah.
We know because the Americans literally have the receipts of selling the ingredients to him.
I know.
We didn't send people in there and get rid of him then. We got rid of him on a false pretext with regards to WMD. So that's not true. We went in there because he was using chemical weapons.
We
didn't. We went there because George W. Bush wants to finish business that Daddy didn't.
But we'd seen what he'd done before to his people, so we probably thought that we didn't want him to get hold of nuclear weapons.
What about now, though?
So that's why we went in there.
What about now? Let's look at now. OK, Ukraine, Palestine. We're probably going to support America in what they're doing with regards to Gaza. That's a given. We wanted to support even up till now where Trump has said, hang on a minute, we can't continue this. Let's try and have a peace agreement. But we still want to push for continuous wars. Where are those people going to come?
I think, again...
We've taken in loads of Ukrainians.
It depends which way you look at it, we're not going for continuous wars, but when people are being bombed and we as a nation try and go in and help and try and do the right thing.
Let's look after our own people instead of imposing things on other countries.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I agree with that, but then I don't think we can be blamed for the mass migration when you've gone into a country to try and help them. And
well, when we leave loads of weapons like we did across the world where rebel groups get it and then we see migrants coming in, how is that not a part of our issue?
Well, let's be honest. But did we start the conflict within their environments? No. The intention was good. That's the point I'm trying to make. What do you think? gbnews.com/your say. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Next, my great British debate. Do you believe there's a retreat of free speech in Britain? First, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia Wendler.
Nana, thank you. Your headlines at 3:33. Thousands of people are marching to the US Embassy in London in protest against Donald Trump's plans for Gaza. It comes after the US president said he wanted to take over the territory and turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East. A counter-protest by Stop the Hate will take place along the march route near Vauxhall Bridge. The Met Police say there'll be a major security operation to keep the groups apart and minimise disruption. They've imposed conditions under the Public Order Act restricting routes, assembly areas and start and finish times. The Munich Security Conference continues today with world leaders including Olaf Scholz and Volodymyr Zelensky discussing global security challenges. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy is calling for European sanctions on people smuggling gangs and will co-host a migration roundtable with Italy. He also says he and US Vice President J.D. Vance agree Ukraine must be part of any peace talks with Russia, as Keir Starmer pushes for Kyiv to join NATO. But the Ukrainian President Zelensky wasn't convinced that Russia wants peace.
This is not just madness. This is Russia's stance. A country that launches such attacks does not want peace. They don't want.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has backed Donald Trump's message to Europe, urging nations to man up and step up their support for Ukraine. Back in the UK, a woman in her 40s has died after a shooting at a village pub in Kent on Valentine's Day. Kent police say she was shot at around 7 o'clock on Friday evening and died at the scene. A murder investigation is now underway, with police confirming the suspect is a man known to the victim. Officers have also found a vehicle and a firearm on the Dartford crossing linked to the incident. In other news, the family of British nationals Craig and Lindsay Foreman is rallying to secure their safe return after the couple was detained in Iran. The pair, who were travelling across the world on motorbikes, were arrested in January, with Iranian state media reporting they face security charges. The Foreman's family described the situation as distressing and expressed their focus on ensuring their safety while working with authorities. The Foreign Office is in contact with the Iranian officials and providing consular support. Now, 240 migrants have crossed the Channel in small boats today. It comes as overnight one woman died when a boat capsized near the coast of France, while dozens of others were rescued. The French Coast Guard has today confirmed they managed to rescue 69 people in the water near Calais, while one sadly died. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest weather forecast for GB News. Stays cloudy through the rest of the weekend for many, further outbreaks of rain and snow in places too, and cold for many of us. Just something a little milder across the far west. High pressure keeping the Atlantic warmth from moving in. Cold southeasterly breeze across the UK. And this weather front giving outbreaks of rain and snow in places too. A few centimetres possible across parts of East Anglia down into southeast England, perhaps Lincolnshire as well. But it should turn back to rain as we head into the early hours, and generally a cloudy night to come for many. Further patchy light rain in places, perhaps a little hill snow over the highest ground across the north and the west. Temperatures close to freezing for many, just something a little milder across the far southwest of England, with some brighter spells to start Sunday. These confined to the far south and north of the UK, so there could be some glimmers of sunshine across coastal stretches of the Highlands into the Western Isles as well, but the east cloudy with wintry showers. Cloudy across Northern Ireland, Northern England as well, with patchy rain, some hill fog, murky conditions, a chilly start for many. Some glimmers of sunshine for western parts of Wales down into the West Country, but even here there'll still be a lot of cloud around, damp towards the east and southeast, and there'll be little change as we go through Sunday. We're still drawing in east to southeasterly winds, keeping a lot of cloud across the UK, some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle, some snow across the high ground across the north as well, some patchy rain across parts of Northern Ireland, and temperatures still chilly for many, 4 to 6 degrees, just a little milder again towards the far west southwest, of highs around 9 to 11 Celsius possible here. As we go through the evening time, still a lot of cloud around. Any clear spells, temperatures will drop away, some icy stretches possible, some frost. And it stays very similar Monday and Tuesday, a lot of cloud around, still on the chilly side, but turning much milder by Wednesday.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, welcome. It's just coming up to 39 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app. Check out all the programmes on the channel. It's completely free. But it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, do you believe there's a retreat of free speech in Britain? Now, US Vice President J.D. Vance has warned that erosion of free speech and mass migration pose a greater risk and a threat than Russia. He told the Munich Security Conference that countries in Europe had allowed their fundamental values to drift, signalling out Britain in particular. So for the Great British Debate this hour, do you agree with him? Do you believe there is a retreat of free speech in the UK? Well, joining me now, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, and also political commentator Lynn May. Lynn May, what do you think?
I do think that a vast majority of the British people felt unheard, and that's why there's this whole conversation around, you know, free speech. And even within myself, I would say things online and I would be massively criticised. I was dismissed from a company from just saying I was going to vote Conservative.
Really?
Yeah. And I feel that the tide has changed now. But yeah, for the simple fact that we had a man, you know, praying, you know, silently praying, and he had to pay over £7,000 in Bournemouth. Like, how does that even, how did we get there? So I think also there needs to be a difference between expressing yourself and then just being a nasty piece of work. I think a lot of people hide behind freedom of speech just to cause offence purposely. But even if someone does cause offence, I don't think you should ever have your job challenged, lose your job. I don't think you should be arrested. But you still could be challenged. I still think you could be challenged.
So freedom of speech does not mean that it's free from the consequences of your words. So some people think that it means, oh, I can say what I like, I can free. But yeah, we have laws though. So once you cross the line and break the law with your speech, then you can be challenged, and it's a consensus.
Then how? Because you can say things differently. I could say the same message, but based on how I articulate it, I wouldn't be arrested or sacked from my job. But if someone has a bit of a harsher approach, they could be. So then how is that freedom of speech?
Well, we have laws as a society as to where that line is. So if you cross that line, no one's saying that you're not free to say it. What we're saying is you are not free from the consequences of what you have just said.
I think often when people confuse incitement with freedom of speech, that's quite annoying for me, because, of course, if somebody says Amrastani lives here, he's done X, and it's not accurate, it's not true, you should go and murder him.
Oh, God.
That call to action it has very material and often grievous consequences. So I think incitement, freedom of speech, two separate things. We legislate for incitement already anyway. In terms of, is it getting worse? I mean, I don't know, because this country, unlike the US, has never had a constitutionally codified right to free speech. I would like to see that. I've said for a long time we should have a written constitution, very minimal, to enshrine things like freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, etc. And I think it's precisely because we don't have something like that. Kids don't learn about that.
We have a sort of Bill of Rights.
Yeah,
but it's
have a Magna Carta, uncodified, and it's multiple documents. Yeah, we do. But it's not. I like the idea of a little pamphlet. Each 6, 7, 8-year-old kid has it, and these are your rights.
But isn't that sort of what Yvette Cooper is heading towards, and giving us definitions for things like Islamophobia and stuff like that?
I think Britain now has the worst of both.
You think?
I think, because we've got the worst of both. So we've got bits of the American system like the Supreme Court, which is ruling on things it shouldn't be ruling on, but we also don't have the constitutional protections on things like freedom of association, freedom of speech, which the Americans do, which I think is really positive. So I think right now we have the worst of both. And I think the point probably is that we should choose one or the other. Either you go back to the pre-1997 status quo, you get rid of a lot of the stuff we've changed since then, or you slim lots of this stuff down. I'd get rid of a ton of legislation personally, and you have stuff enshrined in law like freedom of speech.
But the problem we have is that who will do the tapering down of all of this? Which will it be the Labour Party who may come up with sort of more leftist-leaning freedom in terms of the speech, or will it be a slightly more right-wing version where you have a little bit more openness in what you can and can't say? The problem is, who determines where the line is?
Well, I don't think it has. At the moment, free speech is viewed, it's coded as a right-wing thing, and left-wing people are out to attack it. It wasn't always like that. Rosa Luxemburg in the early 20th century, she was a socialist, she was a writer, and she said that immortal line, no, freedom of speech is freedom to disagree. And I think if you are interested in taking on concentrations of political, economic and cultural power, you have to believe in free speech. So I don't understand people who are on the left who don't believe in free speech.
That's why it won't be consistent, because I should be able to criticise, Islam. I should be able to say why I don't agree with it. But then I should also be able to disagree with Judaism and not be called an anti-Semite. But that's not going to be consistent. Teachers should be able to...
It depends what you say, doesn't it?
Well, why?
Well, it depends if you're calling people names and in your disagreements.
If I say, I'm sorry, I do not accept the texts of the Talmud, and I think they're outdated and I think they're horrific, and I say the same thing about the Quran, I will be massively vindicated for saying things about the Talmud and Judaism, whereas I may not. Or either way, there's teachers that have tried to speak about the Prophet Muhammad, where there's cartoons, they've lost their job. That shouldn't be the case either.
Well, it depends. The problem here...
We don't have blasphemy.
Do you know, I think the problem here is that we have people who have come to this country under theocracies, where there's one religion that everyone's allowed to talk about and the others are brushed under the carpet and you can't, and they've come to this country and they've not modified their way of thinking. So they've not understood that in this country we have a freedom of speech and we have a freedom to disagree, and that doesn't mean that now you're going to kill somebody because they said something against your religion. And I think that that sort of mesh of cultures doesn't work.
We don't teach those things, though, because a lot of those people that come from those countries enjoy and benefit
from the freedom of speech,
freedoms for them to do other things, whether that's have a cheeky drink and smoke in public. But if we say something about the Prophet Muhammad, they're absolutely disgusted. Whereas it's not consistent, and that's my issue with the freedom of speech. If we were to have
a lot of them are intolerant. So where they may have come from, or what their upbringing is, one of intolerance to anybody who disagrees with them. So you come to this country and we have tolerance, where we have freedom of speech, but unfortunately the problem with it is eroding as our population changes, because we are developing a population of people who are intolerant and have not understood the freedom that we have in this country to disagree without suddenly creating some sort of vendetta against each other. But the problem is the left, I think, and in particular many liberal lefts, are now falling into that trap of joining in.
I think it's very easy to say either the right or the left, but I see much of the right talk about, not really supporting freedom of speech when it's against their ideology, vice versa. If we're going to have freedom of speech or expression, we need to be consistent, and sometimes that will involve the right not being happy about what the left says and the left not being happy what the right says.
Yeah, but if you're on a seesaw, the balance will be on the...
Well, you say that, but the amount of times I've criticised Israel and I've been called an anti-Semite, I cannot count the amount of times it's happened, and I personally find it absurd. I'm a Roman Catholic. If you want to say, and I think there's really great merits to that as a worldview and as a life that you want to live. If you want to say, I think it's a backwards, outdated religion 2,000 years ago, it's not fit for the 21st century, knock yourself out. This is 2025 in Britain. You're free to say what you like. And that's why I think you're right to an extent that there was an agreed cultural set of parameters where it was live and let live. Yeah. And we've probably moved away from that slightly. And I think that's more of an argument for teaching this in schools and codifying it a little bit more, because we can't really rely on the foundations that were there 40, 50, 60 years ago.
That those very foundations have created the situation in any case. So the scenario, that scenario means that wherever you are, whatever country you come from, you can come here, preach your virtues, do what you like. Some people call it multiculturalism, where you've got lots of silos of different beliefs and religions, and we all live together, but we don't necessarily, mix. And this very liberal culture that we've created has actually created intolerance. This is what I think.
Well, what's interesting is that the US has, like I say, a codified right to free speech, and yet this is less of an issue. So, for instance, political Islam is less of an issue in the United States where they have free speech. So I think there's probably more to it. I think we've got to, like I say, choose one or the other. You go back to pre-1997, but we probably can't do that. We don't live in the same kind of homogenous society.
Well, what are you saying? GBNews.com/you'll say. But if you are looking for an escape, looking for some winter sun, here's the forecast of some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Heavy showers and thunderstorms affecting the Adriatic and Ionian Sea coastlines, and this could also bring a risk of snow to Croatia. This will be through Saturday and also into Sunday, where low pressure largely dominates. But as we head further west across the Mediterranean, it should be largely settled, bar a little bit of cloud and perhaps the risk of the odd shower across Portugal and northwestern Spain. But Madeira and Tenerife largely settled, and it remains largely settled into next week, with temperatures widely in the mid-teens.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Apparently in 1991, I took out an insurance on my computer, which I have no recollection of at all. But recently, I've had a foreign voice ring me and say, unless I pay the £1,000 immediately, they'll take it out of my bank account.
They wouldn't have access to your bank account.
No, they have no access to my bank account. And what you should do, to begin with, you feel frightened. And you think, my God, £1,000 coming up, what do I do? And then Neil, my partner, said, just ignore it. And that's what you've got to do, but they are persistent.
So threatening as well.
And we changed we changed the number and everything, and still they managed to get through to you. And we told the bank not to accept any £1,000 checks, something like that. But it is awful. But I say to your viewers and listeners, please, please ignore these phone calls.
Yes.
Even if at the end of the day it's true and they do come and collect £1,000 legally, don't do anything about it. Just ignore it.
Yeah. I think there's an organisation you can phone which is anti-scammer.
Is there?
They can do a lot of this stuff for you. I'm no help to you because I don't know what it is.
Well, I might look into that because it is worrying, to begin with, and then they are so persistent.
Yeah.
That is the thing.
My mum had a similar thing the other day, and this is a good tip to remember. And her bank rang her up and said it was her bank, and they needed to get into her account immediately because someone had hacked her account and they were taking her money out. So it's automatically the panic.
Yeah.
You're losing money. Yeah. And they said, just share the one-time password that's about to come to your phone. And at that point, she went, no, you should never share your one-time password.
No.
Anybody asks you to do that, it's a scam.
No,
phone
exactly.
down. So just a good one to remember.
Yeah, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 52 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. Now, a true hero gets the tribute he deserves. World War II veteran Fred Jennings is being treated to a special RAF flypast ahead of his 100th birthday. Well, let's cross over to live to Lisbon and speak to GB News Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie. Doogie, what's happening out there? Talk to me.
Well, Nana, I've had cake. A 100-year birthday cake. We've seen telegrams from the King. It's been fantastic, and Fred has been in really good form. We did an interview with him earlier, but because of his age, and in fact because of most of these guys that flew in the RAF, they have serious hearing problems now, so we're going to turn that interview around a little bit later for you. But it has been such a birthday for him, and actually joining me now is the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland, Emma Little-Pengelly. Emma, you're here. And we've seen the huge helicopter landing outside from the Irish Coast Guard. Why is that?
Well, look, it's fantastic to be here to help Fred celebrate his 100th birthday. Unbelievably, Fred is still a volunteer here at the Ulster Aviation, absolutely wonderful place here in the heart of Lagan Valley here in Northern Ireland. So a huge range of craft, and of course, because of his love of aviation, he was very much involved in terms of radar and all of those associated issues. That's why he volunteers here, and what a brilliant place to have his 100th birthday party.
Well, it is. It's a 100th birthday, and his history is marvellous. And I mean, quite a few people of Northern Ireland served in the forces here.
Look, absolutely. Northern Ireland, per head of the population across the United Kingdom, of course, has contributed significantly more to the UK Armed Forces, and that included in, of course, the First and Second World Wars and the many in between as well. So huge legacy here in terms of that service, and so many incredible stories. We've heard some of that from Fred today as well, about the many places he served all over the world before coming back here to Lisburn to make his home.
Well, there you go, Nana. And of course, Fred was specialising in radar during the Second World War. And he told us the story of how they had ground attacks and so forth from German aircraft coming into them at really low levels. He had to dive into a crater, basically to keep himself alive. And men like that don't really exist anymore. And if they do, we never sing their praises hard enough, and really are very thankful for what they did for us early in their life. I mean, he's 100 years old, and you think about it, when he was 19, 20 years of age, he was putting it all on the line, and he deserves this birthday here today at the Ulster Aviation Society. And I must say, I never really put any advertising or anything, but if you ever get a chance, you can see behind me here beautiful Tornado planes. There's all sorts of planes and helicopters here that have been decommissioned and end up in this museum, and you couldn't ask for a better place than to have a 100th birthday for an RAF hero.
All right. Well, listen, Doogie Beattie, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. That is Doogie Beattie. He's there in Northern Ireland. Lovely to talk to you. Right, well, lots of you have been getting in touch. Grumpy Grandad says we've been talking about religion and sort of cultures and everything else like that. He says we're importing cultures that are at odds with our own. Surely they should adapt to our way of life, not the other way around. Well, I hear you, and I agree with that to some degree, but then we have this free nation where people can do and say whatever they like within the bounds of the law, and we accept all peoples and all religions and everything else like that. That's the nation that we live in. Dubbing says it's simple people. We need to vote for reform if we want to get our country back. Catherine says exactly, Nana. Too many people coming to this country with different attitudes about our culture and a lack of respect. Then Sharon says, JD and Trump are amazing. Wish we had a Prime Minister like them who protects his people and cares about women, children and looks after our elderly farmers and wants our country to be great again. Well, I think, you know, Keir Starmer will probably say that he is. But listen, on the way next, my niggle is on Rachel Reeves. Yes, our wonderful Chancellor. I take on her and I ask if it's time to go. What do you think? Stay tuned. That is on the way.
Want to be one of 2 lucky Great British giveaway winners? That's right, you could win one of 2 prize bundles, which includes a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in your favourite store, and an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. What would you spend that cash on? For another chance to win, Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, hello and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's just 4 o'clock and for the next hour me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Well, joining me for the next few hours, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, and also political commentator Lynn May. Coming up in my niggle, I take on Rachel Reeves, following reports that she was investigated over her expenses whilst working for a bank. Of course, every time her lots of questions, they come up with the fixing the foundations baloney.
Change our plan, not changing the conversation. Change and reform are coming. Fixing the foundations.
That's why we are fixing the foundations to better support our public finances. At my first budget in October, it was my duty as Chancellor to fix the foundations of our economy.
So is it time for Rachel to go? Meanwhile, Foreign Secretary David Lammy, here's another one, has been European countries to do more to smash the people smuggling gangs as he meets counterparts at the Munich Security Conference. So I'm asking, do you trust Labour to smash the gangs? Well, if you've got an answer to that one, you can head over to the GB News website, gbnews.com, cast your vote in my poll. And US Vice President JD Vance has blasted the UK and Europe over protest laws and immigration policies.
And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
So is he right? Do you believe that there is a retreat of free speech in Britain? But before all of that, let's get your latest news with Sophia Wentler.
Nana, thank you. It's just gone 4 o'clock. These are your headlines. The Foreign Secretary has urged Ukraine to seek closer business and trade ties with Donald Trump's US to guarantee its future security. David Lammy made the comments at the second day of the Munich Security Conference, with world leaders including Olaf Scholz and Volodymyr Zelensky discussing global security challenges. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy also called for European sanctions on people smuggling gangs and will co-host a migration roundtable with Italy. He also says he and US Vice President J.D. Vance agree Ukraine must be part of any peace talks with Russia, but the Ukrainian President Zelensky wasn't convinced that Russia wants peace.
This is not just madness. This is Russia's stance. A country that launches such attacks does not want peace. They don't want.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has backed Donald Trump's message to Europe, urging nations to man up and step up their support for Ukraine. Thousands of people have marched to the US Embassy in London in protest against Donald Trump's plans for Gaza. The protest came after a proposal by President Donald Trump earlier this month for the United States to consider taking ownership of the Gaza Strip. Mr. Trump suggested the US could redevelop the war-torn territory into the Riviera of the Middle East. The Met Police promised a major security operation to keep the groups apart and minimise disruption today. They imposed conditions under the Public Order Act, restricting routes, assembly areas and start and finish times. In other news, a woman in her 40s has died after a shooting at a village in Kent on Valentine's Day. Kent police say she was shot at around 7 o'clock on Friday evening at a pub and died at the scene. A murder investigation is now underway, with police confirming the suspect is a man known to the victim. Officers have also found a vehicle and a firearm on the Dartford crossing linked to the incident. Elsewhere, the family of British nationals Craig and Lindsay Foreman are rallying to secure their safe return after the couple was detained in Iran. The pair, who were travelling across the world on motorbikes, were arrested in January, with Iranian state media reporting they face security charges. The Foreman's family described the situation as distressing and expressed their focus on ensuring their safety while working with authorities. The Foreign Office is in contact with Iranian officials and providing consular support. Now, 240 migrants have crossed the Channel in small boats today. It comes as overnight one woman died when a boat capsized near the coast of France, while dozens of others were rescued. French Coast Guards confirmed they managed to rescue 69 people in the water near Calais, while one sadly died. 2 men have been charged after a man was attacked outside the Turkish consulate in London while burning a Quran. Footage on social media shows the victim on the ground as a knife-wielding attacker kicks him. 50-year-old Hamit Kuskan from Derby has been charged with a religiously aggravated public order offence, while Musa Kadri, who's 59, faces charges of actual bodily harm and possessing an offensive weapon. Koskan is due in court today, while Kadri has been bailed until Monday. And world number 1 Yannick Sinner has been handed a 3-month ban from tennis after settling a doping case with the World Anti-Doping Agency. The Australian Open champion tested positive for the banned substance clostribol last year, but was found to have been inadvertently contaminated by his physiotherapist. Authorities had initially sought a ban of up to 2 years, but agreed to a reduced suspension after accepting Sinner had no intent to cheat. He will miss major tournaments in the US and Europe, but can return in May for the Italian Open. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Nana.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It is fast approaching 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Apparently, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is not satisfied.
The growth numbers have come in higher than many expected, but I'm still not satisfied with the level of growth that our economy is achieving.
Neither are we. A BBC News investigation, even there turning against Labour, revealed that concerns were raised about Rachel's expenses when she was working at HBOS between 2006 and 2009. It was a detailed 6-page complaint from a whistleblower with dozens of pages of supporting evidence documents, including emails, receipts and memos, which accused Rachel and 2 other managers, one of them her boss, of using the bank's money to fund a lifestyle of events, taxis and gifts for each other. The BBC claimed to have seen these documents and spoken to more than 20 people. Some of them were her former colleagues. From a dodgy CV to a suspended parliamentary credit card and now some questionable expenses that the Labour Party are trying to shove under the rug. It's not a case of whether Rachel goes, it's a case of when. I'll give her 3 months. By that time, we'll have another set of economic growth figures, which I believe will be the final nail in Rachel's coffin. Every time these lot come up with something, they always come up with the fixing the foundations baloney.
Change our plan, not changing the conversation. Change and reform are coming. Fixing the foundations.
That's why we are fixing the foundations to better support our public finances.
We're going to take those hard choices because it's vital we fix the foundations and build that brighter future that he described in his visionary speech.
At my first budget in October, it was my duty as Chancellor to fix the foundations of our economy.
Fix the foundation, fix the foundation, fix the foundation. I'll fix them all into the flaming foundation. Seriously, from Rachel Reeves to Sir Keir Starmer, David Lammy, Ed Miliband, Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper, Bridget Phillipson and the Tory party as well. It'll be a long time before the British public forgive them for landing us into the quagmire. It's like a ruminating nightmare. Our politicians have failed us. Well, here's what else is coming up today. Foreign Secretary David Lammy is urging European countries to do more to smash the people smuggling gangs as he meets counterparts at the Munich Security Conference. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time for Rachel Reeves to go? And in the next Great British Debate of the hour, will Donald Trump's tax tariff tactics pay off? Those tariffs could leave us at risk of a whopping £24 billion blow to our economy. But is he right to do that? And I'll be joined by US political commentator Lee Cohen, who thinks that Donald Trump is the only man to save the European civilization. All of that is on the way. As ever, send me your thoughts, post your comments, gbnews.com/your say. Well, joining me now is the former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards. Peter Edwards, are you not sick of hearing your people, as in the Labour Party, go on about fixing the foundations?
Well, all political parties have slogans, and the old adage is it's only when the people saying them are so sick and tired of them that they're bored that the public start to take notice. And let me give you one example. In the general election, you know, people who are in the Westminster bubble in the media, you know, and I'm guilty of that, made a joke about how often we heard Keir Starmer's father was a toolmaker, but fewer than a third of the public were aware of what his father did for a living. So although it seemed like it was repeated endlessly, it hadn't cut through.
Tools.
Toolmaker.
The irony. Look, Rachel Reeves, seriously, first of all, the inconsistencies in her so-called online CV, so that would be on her LinkedIn profile, which changed 3 times. Then we've had other things where we know that her parliamentary credit card was suspended after £4,000 of undocumented or expenses were seen on it, so she had it suspended. And now here we go again with another instance where we are hearing that people have said that she, although this was, I think, some sort of work initiative, there's been a lot of money that's spent in expenses that didn't seem correct.
So the important thing in all of this has been no finding of wrongdoing. And I'm a former newspaper reporter, and it's completely legitimate that reporters try and find out information about public figures, but there's been no finding of wrongdoing. And I thought you mustn't lose sight of that.
Well, the fact that there was quite a detailed report on it, though, does suggest that there was some sort of suspicion.
So referring to the expenses at HBOS?
Right, yeah. So that's not good, is it?
But it wasn't a report. It was a whistleblowing claim. So that's different to an official or an independent report. And the whistleblowers, of course, have legal protections in every workplace, but the whistleblowing report was what was not verified. And all the media have said, based on the comments of HBOS sources and I think Labour sources, that the process wasn't completed. There was no disciplinary process against Rachel Reeves that even began, let alone one that was concluded against her. So it does come back to the point, yes, it's a job of reporters to find out embarrassing things about public figures, but there's been no finding of wrongdoing. And I think that's vital, because obviously all jobs in government require probity, but particularly when you're Chancellor.
Well, that's quite true, but the CV situation was another one where she said that she was a decade at the Bank of England, which wasn't true at all. I mean, she doubled the time, and actually in the 5 years that she was there, 1 year she was actually training. So do you think that she's qualified enough to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer? Do you think that she's got the right credentials, really?
Yes, I mean, I do, because I think she trained as an economist and she worked in a bank. And actually, you know, I don't see how that would bar from anyone. If you think about the way politics works, you know, you win or lose based on your arguments as well as your CV. You know, I think George Osborne may have studied history. Boris Johnson was a magazine editor, and so on and so on. There's no qualification to be Prime Minister per se. And let me give you one example. Ben Wallace, who was seen as a very effective Defence Secretary under the Tories, was a former soldier, a veteran, and was a good Defence Secretary. But that's actually been relatively rare. Nearly all of the Defence Secretaries in the last 30 years have not been ex-military personnel.
We would forgive Rachel if she didn't have the so-called work experience, and I don't think she has, frankly, to be the Chancellor if the economy was going gangbusters. But let's be honest, many of the policies that she's put forward, including the tax on workers, because even though she says it's on employers, it isn't really. She herself has said it's a job tax, and raising it on either is still a tax on employees, even though she's only attacking the employers of public companies, which again is madness. But do you think that she has the credentials, seriously? Because she's not doing well, is she? Would you say that she's doing a good job as Chancellor so far?
I'm not going to repeat the phrase about foundations, but I think they've started to put in place. They've started to put in place some of the things that will bear fruit. I completely accept. I support the Labour government. They'll be judged on economic growth and on cost of living pressures, which have been elevated for well over a decade now, since about 2007. So Labour will be judged on economic growth. That's fair enough. But whether it's quote unquote fixing the foundations or putting the building blocks in place, things like settling some of the strikes, starting to get the NHS moving again, setting up Great British Energy. These are, if you like, not necessarily sexy or exciting things, but they're all about trying to make economic growth a bit easier to happen.
You say settling the strikes, but they settled the strikes simply by settling them. There was no real negotiation in terms of some sort of concession from a lot of the unions that they closed these talks down with, and we could have got a lot more. So it feels to me like they're just literally handing money out without any real comeback. It doesn't really work for the British people, because we're the taxpayers. We're the ones that are going to have to pay for the pay rises.
Well, we're all focused on GDP, quite rightly, but every day the trains are not running is a further multi-billion-pound hit. So these things are not just judged in isolation of, is this a fair claim? I actually think they were. I think it's quite tough being a train driver. I'm not sure I could do it. But secondly, the cost in time as well of trains.
You'd be good at it.
Of trains. Well, you haven't seen me struggling with a map and having cold sweats in the car.
You'd be good at it because there's a track and it just takes you where you got to go.
But there is a cost as well to trains not running. And a prolonged dispute.
Yes, but there's also a cost to things not running efficiently. So there are certain savings that they could have made in terms of AI, or changing some of the company practices, or reducing staff where not needed, or doing those things that a private company would do so they can maximise profits or spend less. And none of that kind of...
Well, they are private companies, though, Nana.
But as a whole, though, well, they are, but they're not really, because they're answerable to the government in that respect.
But they're not owned by you or I as a taxpayer.
But we still pay for those pay rises, right? So that money for the pay rises comes out of the public purse. So that's where I draw the line. So if the money's coming out of the public purse for those pay rises, then there should be some negotiation as to some form of efficiency that will mean that we don't need to spend so much, and there wasn't. And that, I feel, was the problem with her negotiation.
Well, Well, we've got to be clear, we generally don't have nationalised railways in Britain, although that's in a process of changing as franchises are allowed to run off. But I think you and I don't always agree, but I think we could agree that the railway system is not working properly. We've got this weird hybrid system where they're run by private companies for shareholder benefit, so capitalism. But you and I, the taxpayers, are giving subsidies. And obviously, like anything in life, if we're paying for it, then it'd be nice to have control and ownership of it as well.
Well, I will agree there. Fine. Wow.
A happy moment.
This is a happy moment between Peter Edwards and myself. Wonderful. Peter Edwards is the editor of Labour List. Right, it's just coming up to 17 minutes after 4 o'clock. President Zelensky has called for the creation of an armed forces of Europe. Let's get the latest from Munich with our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, how was that received? An armed forces of Europe, that's sort of NATO, I suppose. Isn't that doubling up on something we've already got? Or he's just saying it so that he can be included in it, right?
Sorry, Nana, I'm struggling to hear you because there's bells. As you may have noticed, there is also a pro-Ukraine protest happening behind me, so I'm trying to shout. I hope you can hear me. So yes, Zelensky calling for an army of Europe, and the reason he's doing that is fundamentally it sounds very much like we can no longer rely on the United States to help us if we need it. The US Defense Secretary, Peter Hegseth, said the other day that the US no longer were primarily focused on the security of Europe. So in many ways, potentially, we might be on our own. So it's been a very worrying time for leaders here in Munich. It started the other day when Donald Trump had that 90-minute phone call with Putin. Then yesterday, J.D. Vance, the vice president, talked for 20 minutes, not about Ukraine, not about security, basically taking a pop at European leaders on what he says is the suppression of free speech, especially in Britain and also in Scotland particularly. And then also saying that leaders have a lot to answer for allowing millions of migrants into Europe over the last years. Of course, I'm not far from where just 2 days ago a failed asylum seeker drove into a crowd of people. And then to top it all, Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president today, coming here to the conference just literally a couple of hundred meters down that way and saying that they had intelligence suggesting that Russia is planning to send troops to Belarus this year. He also said that they had intelligence suggesting they could potentially be planning to invade a NATO country next year. That's obviously incredibly serious. So a lot of worry here. I talked to Boris Johnson yesterday. You can watch it in full on YouTube. He said there was a lot of headless chickenism about here. He really doesn't think Europe has as much to worry about as many in Europe think. Let's hope that he's correct.
All right, Catherine, thank you very much. She's there in Munich, a very noisy Munich as well. Thank you very much, Catherine. All right, well, stay with me. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Next, it's time for the great British debates of this hour. I'm asking, is it time for Rachel Reeves to go?
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself, well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness
So basically, long story short, about 6 years ago, I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy, and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So basically, I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness of my window cleaning business at the time. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs. As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing. So
GBNews viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wilder's the sign guy can sort you out.
if you find Liam the sign guy online, drop me a message, let me know, and I'll add you to my list of places.
GBNews, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 24 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. And I've been asking for the Great British Debate this hour, is it time for Rachel Reeves to go? Now, the Chancellor is under pressure as she considers introducing a stealth income tax rise in the upcoming spring statement. But can she be trusted to get the economy booming again? Or is it a step too far? So the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time for Rachel Reeves to go? After all, £4,000 on a parliamentary credit card, which is sort of some sort of unauthorised spending. I wonder what that was for. Nobody's really looking into that. I mean, heaven forbid it would be maybe paying for something like tax or anything like that. I want to know. Rachel, the £4,000, what was that about? Don't talk to me about fixing the flaming foundations. But joining me, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, and political commentator Lynn May. Aaron Bastani. £4,000 on a parliamentary credit card.
She lost the card, right?
Yeah.
There was 15 of them, I think, and she was one of the special 15, I think, something like that.
And it was suspended, the credit card, as well.
Yeah.
I want to know what was on that credit card. I mean, maybe there's a Freedom of Information Act that you could put forward, requests that you can put forward to find out what she spent that on.
It's a lot of money.
It was £4,000 on a credit card.
It's a lot of money. I mean, she seems like somebody who's quite frugal, you know. She doesn't take expensive holidays like Boris or whatever, but who knows?
Well, she can't add up because 5 isn't 10, is it? 5 years isn't 10. She doesn't know the difference between a decade and half a decade.
Well, that's true. And also, it's important to say, so you were referring to, I think it was in 2015 or 2016, with regards to her parliamentary credit card being suspended.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, there's been this allegation from a whistleblower, it's important to say, nothing was confirmed, with regards to, again, something similar going on with expenses. So there's potentially two different professional situations in which the Chancellor has been in hot water with regards to expenses, potentially. Doesn't seem like the sort of necessarily the CV you want of somebody administering the country's finances.
And then
just a thought.
Well, the CV, as you mentioned, what was on the CV? It wasn't true, was it?
Well, putting aside that, you know, she inherited the fastest growing economy in the G7 prior to her tenure, we now feel poorer in terms of per capita GDP. She said that she was not going to, her budget was not going to affect working people. Well, it has. It potentially will again in the spring. Yeah. But on a more closer note to setting a precedent for people in this country, I used to work in Welfare to Work, and people would often say, I've been out of work for X amount of years, or, you know, I've got this job, I was only there for 6 months. Can I say 2 years? And I would say, well, no, because, you know, you could be dismissed for gross misconduct. You're lying on your CV. Are we saying, I need Rachel Reeves to come out and say it, are we saying we can lie on our CV now? Because some people are on hard times and they're desperate and they may need to, you know, wiggle their... Exactly.
Well, she might say that it wasn't so much a lie as an embellishment. She did work there, but it wasn't for...
But this has happened twice on her LinkedIn, and now she's coming out and she's saying...
3 times, I think they made amendments, actually.
Even worse. And now they're saying, you know, it's her staff that's done the error. It's not her. So now she's trying to pass the buck. Does that mean that she has management issues in terms of her, you know...
Well, maybe she didn't do it personally, because it's like when I was younger, what we would do to my younger sister is we would all... There'd be a big litre bottle of Coca-Cola. My eldest brother would drink some, I would drink some, and then my sister would drink the last bit. And when my parents said, who finished this? We'd say, she did. So she did finish it, but we all drank a bit of it. It's kind of a bit of that, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think what a leader would do, is they'd say, it's my LinkedIn page, it's my name on it, I'm responsible.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
It's been a screw-up. Even if it's because of an employee, you don't say that. You don't say that.
Who gave them the information to put that in there? She accepted the information to be correct, and it is assigned to her.
But even she tried to justify it as well. When she was being interviewed, she was trying to justify it by saying, you know, it's I was there. It's only a few years. Like, how can you have a straight face? But I think politicians would gain more respect if they just came out and say, do you know what, in hindsight, I shouldn't have done that. I don't advise people to do it. I'm going to change it immediately. Let's move on.
But we get a bit annoyed with them. You can, because I get a bit annoyed with them doing stuff and then just saying sorry and thinking that will be the end of it as well.
Well, maybe she could have just said, look, the dates are a bit hazy. You know what, I didn't care that much. That's the sort of thing Trump would do, right? I didn't really care that much. I just linked in. Now I'm the Chancellor.
But it's the two things in tandem.
I agree, there's a pattern.
She was an economist when she worked in probably complaints, I think it was.
Well, the thing is, I always tell people, pick a struggle. If she's going to have these issues with expenses, embellishment of CV, at least have some policies around your budget or fiscal plan that is going to create and bolster growth. She doesn't seem to have either, so why is she still there?
Well, also, retail banking and investment banking, so complaints, customer complaints...
Very different.
...and investment banking are very, very different.
Very different.
So she doesn't really, in my view, have enough experience to do the job. But, Aaron...
let's go back to the question for this segment.
Well, should she be fired?
Let me defend Rachel Reeves.
Why?
Who's going to replace her that's going to be any better? And this is a serious question.
But do you know how sad that is? For Labour to not have at least 3 or 4 alternatives of people, politicians that are fiscally responsible, that they can choose from, that we're lumbered with Rachel because there's nobody else. Imagine if we were to run a business on that. Oh, we can't, you know, get rid of our manager because there's nobody else.
That's not the point, though. The point is you've made some stuff up on your CV. There's these expense stories coming out, and we still have yet to get the details of what was spent on the £4,000 parliamentary credit card that was suspended. I would really like to know about that. So that person doesn't seem to be fit for the position they're in. So whether or not you've got somebody better, I think you should be punished if you haven't done the job well. And also the economy is looking bad.
Well, they did probably start... Well, they didn't start a recession, so there was a real worry because the last quarter of last year... the third quarter of last year, rather, 0.1% contraction, and then the fourth quarter, I think, was 0.1% growth. So we're standing still. But if that had been a contraction, then we would technically be in a recession. For people out there watching, listening, that would have been the country's 3rd recession in 5 years. That is not normal. That is not normal to basically be in recession all of the time. And unlike lockdown and unlike the cost of living crisis, that would have been catalysed by the politicians. If you look at business confidence, right after July, really high, actually. They're really enthusiastic about change of government, new, hand on the deck. Let's see how this goes, new hand on the tiller, rather. And basically, they talk down the economy so much after about August, September, it falls off a cliff. Business confidence falls off a cliff. And we're now in the situation where I think there was the Lloyd's tracker in December. 11 of 13 sectors that they're monitoring, basically they think that they're going to have a very bad quarter. So for many industries, we are in a recession.
Employment is at all-time low in private sector. We have seen, thousands of millionaires wanting to leave and leaving. And I can't see how this encourages business or growth the way that the Labour Party is going.
Well, their policies, I would agree, have not encouraged growth. They're not listening when business is saying to them that the policies are wrong. And Rachel Reeves has gone back on the very thing that she said she wasn't going to do. And I don't feel they're doing any of the things they said they would do in their manifesto. And now I think it looks like they're going to start looking to raise income tax. So, read it, you know, very quickly, Aaron.
Yeah, well, there's also something we're not talking about here, which is that in 2019 we spent 5% of government spending on servicing our national debt. Today's 10%. And I think, actually, if we're being fair to the Labour Party, the Tories are completely AWOL in how do you address that. They created that mess, and they never really talk about actually solutions for getting this country on a sound financial footing.
Well, no, I give credit to Rishi Sunak, though, for his work. I have to say fair enough to him, because had inflation gone up, we would be blaming him. So the fact that he was able to bring it down, we must credit him for that. And also that incredible speech that he gave after Rachel Reeves spoke, his last speech in the Houses of Parliament, which I thought was really something else. But you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, the next great British debate of this hour. I'm asking, will Donald Trump's tariff tactics pay off? But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Nana, thank you. Your headlines at 4:32. The Foreign Secretary has urged Ukraine to seek closer business and trade ties with Donald Trump's US to guarantee its future safety. David Lammy made the comments on the second day of the Munich Security Conference, with world leaders including Olaf Scholz and Volodymyr Zelensky discussing global security challenges. The UK Foreign Secretary also called for European sanctions on people smuggling gangs and will co-host a migration roundtable with Italy. He also said he and US Vice President J.D. Vance agree Ukraine must be part of any peace talks with Russia. However, the Ukrainian President Zelensky wasn't convinced that Russia wants peace.
This is not just madness. This is Russia's stance. A country that launches such attacks does not want peace. They don't want.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has backed Donald Trump's message to Europe, urging nations to man up and step up their support for Ukraine. Thousands of people have marched to the US Embassy in London in protest against Donald Trump's plans for Gaza. The protest came after a proposal by President Donald Trump earlier this month for the United States to consider taking ownership of the Gaza Strip. Mr. Trump suggested the US could redevelop the war-torn territory into the Riviera of the Middle East. The Met Police promised a major security operation to keep the groups apart and minimise disruption today. They imposed conditions under the Public Order Act restricting routes, assembly areas and start and finish times. In other news, the family of British nationals Craig and Lindsay Foreman are rallying to secure their safe return after the couple was detained in Iran. The pair, who were travelling across the world on motorbikes, were arrested in January, with Iranian state media reporting they face security charges. The Foreman's family described the situation as distressing and expressed their focus on ensuring their safety while working with authorities. The Foreign Office is in contact with Iranian officials and providing consular support. Elsewhere, 240 migrants have crossed the channel in small boats today. It comes as overnight one woman died when a boat capsized near the coast of France, while dozens of others were rescued. The French Coast Guard has now confirmed they managed to rescue 69 people in the water near Calais, while one sadly died. And Elon Musk has fathered a secret 13th child with a 26-year-old MAGA influencer, according to reports. Ashley St. Clair made the unconfirmed claims in a Valentine's Day post on Musk's social media site X last night. The Conservative commentator explained she had not intended to share the information publicly, but felt she had no choice after it became clear that media intended to do so. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest weather forecast for GB News. Stays cloudy through the rest of the weekend for many, further outbreaks of rain and snow in places too, and cold for many of us. Just something a little milder across the far west. High pressure keeping the Atlantic warmth from moving in. Cold southeasterly breeze across the UK. And this weather front giving outbreaks of rain and snow in places too. A few centimetres possible across parts of East Anglia down into southeast England, perhaps Lincolnshire as well. But it should turn turn back to rain as we head into the early hours, and generally a cloudy night to come for many. Further patchy light rain in places, perhaps a little hill snow over the highest ground across the north and the west. Temperatures close to freezing for many, just something a little milder across the far southwest of England, with some brighter spells to start Sunday. These confined to the far south and north of the UK, so there could be some glimmers of sunshine across coastal stretches of the Highlands into the Western Isles as well, but the east cloudy with wintry showers. Cloudy across Northern Ireland, Northern England as well, with patchy rain, some hill fog, murky conditions, a chilly start for many. Some glimmers of sunshine for western parts of Wales down into the West Country, but even here there'll still be a lot of cloud around, damp towards the east and southeast, and there'll be little change as we go through Sunday. We're still drawing in east to southeasterly winds, keeping a lot of cloud across the UK, some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle, some snow across the higher ground across the north as well, some patchy rain across parts of Northern Ireland, and temperatures still chilly for many, 4 to 6 degrees, just a little milder again towards the far west southwest, of highs around 9 to 11 Celsius possible here. As we go through the evening time, still a lot of cloud around. Any clear spells, temperatures will drop away, some icy stretches possible, some frost. And it stays very similar Monday and Tuesday, a lot of cloud around, still on the chilly side, but turning much milder by Wednesday.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
38 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. Don't forget as well, you can stream the show live on YouTube or catch up on the GB News app. I'm Nana Akua. It's time now for the great British debate of this hour. I'm asking, will Donald Trump's tariff tactics pay off? Potential new measures could hit the UK economy at a very precarious time. And these escalating tariffs could lead to a damaging trade war, impacting industries and consumers on both sides of the Atlantic. But with Donald Trump pushing for a radical shift in trade policy, the question remains, will these tactics bolster the US economy or will they backfire? The aim is that whatever we're charging him, he will charge us. So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, will Donald Trump's tariff tactics pay off? Joining me, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, and also political commentator Lynn May. Aaron Bastani.
So Trump's trade guru is a guy called Peter Navarro, and he's written loads of stuff about how tariffs are really smart and they'll really help. I think in the medium to long term, they possibly could help the US. In the short term, they're going to create, I think, a bit of an inflation spike, depending obviously on the sector. German cars, for instance, are going to get significantly more expensive, or Scotch. So I think in the short term, you'll see something of an inflation spike. In the medium term, I think it's going to really help the US with reindustrialization. In terms of the UK, doesn't really impact us that much because we don't make anything. But in terms of somebody like Germany, like I say, they export a ton of cars to the US, or France exporting luxury goods to the US, Louis Vuitton, etc. They could be a real problem. There are certain sectors in the UK, like particularly whiskey. Basically, whiskey is the one thing which, you know, could be in real trouble. But yeah, I think the naysayers who say this is always bad, tariffs don't work. Actually, if you look at the economic history of the 19th century, the US got rich from tariffs. That was the US's sort of development model. So I don't really buy that.
All right, Lynn May.
I think tariffs can be a good thing. It's a balancing act because China is the big world, maker, manufacturer. But I think if we were to allow China or America even to continue to flood the world with cheap goods, it does really affect local industry. And to your point, it will help industrialization in America. And, one of his huge points was, I want to bring industry back into America, and this is the way to do it. And they are the biggest consumer in the world. Why would you not try and make money with imports? So, countries already, we've seen them capitulate: Colombia, Canada, Mexico. So I do think he's using it a little bit as a weapon, but why not?
Why not use that as a weapon rather
than killing people, boots on the ground?
Exactly.
I'm much more in favour of a tariff war than, a hot war, so to speak. So, yeah, I think he needs to be a little bit careful, but I do think he's sticking it to BRICS as well, where we can see, again, this alliance of Brazil, India, China, Russia gaining more momentum, and he wants to stop that. He said recently, in an interview, BRICS is dead. They're scared of not using the dollar. He wants to assert the dollar as the main currency again and stop in its tracks any idea that it's going to go away.
Would you like to see a bit more of that sort of gusto from our politicians in the UK? After all, we're no longer shackled by the rules of the EU. So would you like to see a bit more of that? Could we have used any of those sort of tariff tactics?
Debatable. We don't make anything. What I would say is,
resources are like.
What I do, and I'm on the left, right? I don't agree with lots of things that Trump does or says. What I do like about Trump is his ability to think outside of the box and to just not repeat status quo common sense, which is basically what British politicians are, right? You say X, Y, Z, you pretend you're interested in X, Y, Z. Fundamentally, you're quite boring.
Yeah.
You behave in a certain way. You sound a certain way. It's like these people are, made with a cookie cutter. And I think the country would absolutely benefit from original thinking and people doing politics differently. And people are yearning out for that.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's why people were interested in Boris Johnson, briefly in Jeremy Corbyn, Scottish nationalism. Now it's reform. People want something different.
Well, even Tony Blair, they were Margaret Thatcher, always as standout people who, stuck by their convictions. But this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome one of our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Let's go to Shropshire. Let's have a chat with Adrian Gell. Adrian, what are your thoughts on all of this? Trump's tariff tactics, do you think that they are a wise tactic and that they will pay off?
Well, I think time will tell. And part of the purpose of it is that Donald Trump wants to help his own internal markets. But on the other hand, that doesn't necessarily produce the profits that the US wants for its economy at the end of the day. Trouble with tariffs is that they're very attacking on other economies, and for sure we won't. We won't be left out of the attack if that's in the case. Part of our problem is that we've got such a wet government, such a wet chancellor and such a wet prime minister. Do they actually have the balls to stand up to Donald Trump and do a trade deal? And a trade deal for us with America, in my view, is far more important than a trade deal with the EU. OK, we might be hit very hard as far as our whiskey goes, or as the Americans might call it, their scotch. But, it's... I think we need to see what happens. He's only been in power for a matter of weeks, and these are discussions that he's put on the table and ideas he's put on the table. But we know full well that these are often ideas that he can climb down.
Adrian, in such a short space of time, he's already got people talking. He's, literally called on people to stop fighting. And frankly, he's, I think, the best chance the world have of some sort of global stability. Adrian Gell, thank you very much. He's our great British voice. Lovely to talk to you. He's there in Shropshire. Now, if you are in search of some winter sun, then here is the forecast of some of the top European holiday destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Heavy showers and thunderstorms affecting the Adriatic and Ionian Sea coastlines, and this could also bring a risk of snow to Croatia. This will be through Saturday and also into Sunday, where low pressure largely dominates. But as we head further west across the Mediterranean, it should be largely settled, bar a little bit of cloud and perhaps the risk of the odd shower across Portugal and northwestern Spain. But Madeira and Tenerife largely settled, and it remains largely settled into next week, with temperatures widely in the mid-teens.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And then fashionistas are keen to see which new trends are set to hit the catwalk.
Well, our next guest is very well placed to share her predictions with us after being a contestant on hit ITV series Dress the Nation, as well as being an upcycling and sewing consultant.
Wow. Joining us now is Tendai Murewe. I want to go back to you appearing on the ITV Dress the Nation.
Right.
Tell us about that experience. What was that like?
Oh, that was one of my highlights as a upcycling consultant. I learned to sew in my kitchen 5 years ago. And then, during COVID, just making masks. Then the next thing I was on a Dress the Nation, making dresses in front of TV. Yeah, it was just incredible. I think we all had all these clothes that we have, but we don't know what to do with them. So mainly I started with men's jackets, taking off the sleeves and putting it like a print on.
I've tried this. I've tried taking off my sleeves before. I now have about 3 jackets with no sleeves. I never managed to put them back on.
You need to come to a workshop. You need to come to a workshop.
I need an upcycling consultant. 2025, what can we expect fashion-wise?
I think bold prints are back. People are loving. I think you walk on the streets in frollos and oversized men's jackets.
So the exact opposite. We have drastically underperformed this morning. You're just saying not like us.
We just woke up this morning and thought it's winter, it's cold, it's grey.
Grey, miserable.
Is that not the way to go?
No, it is. I think because fashion is expressive. It's whatever you want to express yourself.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So if you just tuned in, where have you been? It's just over an hour left of the programme, but OK, you're here now. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. Now, with Donald Trump ramping up his tough talk on tariffs and trade, the UK could be caught in the crossfire of his America First agenda. But are his policies a necessary move to protect US interests, or could they spark an all-out trade war? Well, to get a US perspective, let's go live to Florida and speak to Lee Cohen. Lee, what do you think of your great leader, Donald Trump? Is he doing good?
Pleasure to be with you, Nana. Trump is doing an absolutely fantastic job. He's living up to everything that he's promised. And particularly, there was a lot of outcry from J.D. Vance's speech yesterday in Munich. I know you've been talking about it. let's face it, Vance wasn't looking to win any popularity contests. His Munich speech was a necessary clarion call, rightfully calling out Europe's leadership for their reckless, suicidal immigration policies and contempt for democratic principles. He nailed it, Nana.
Well, hold on. But your porous borders in the United States, you had millions of people coming in from Mexico. So I get you, I agree with you. But, I mean, people in glass houses, really, frankly, shouldn't be throwing stones. Although they have changed things up, I've got to say.
And what you just said is true. That was in the prior administration under Biden, where we had open borders, much like you've had open borders, under successive administrations that have caused an immigration catastrophe. But Donald Trump is putting a stop to all of that, as you know, sending criminals abroad, looking at Guantanamo Bay. Really, this has come to a halt under Donald Trump. And you're absolutely right. We did have this too. It's not glass houses anymore, though.
No. Do you feel sorry for us here in the UK with our political direction and leadership?
Nana, to watch our great mother country, England, the United Kingdom, suffer under such misguided and unbelievably socialist leadership, that's so backward looking. You face a choice now: either join, the ascendant, confident, prosperous and safe vision of Donald Trump, or to look towards Europe. And unfortunately, saddled with Keir Starmer for 4 years, one has the impression that you could choose the latter, which would be continuing catastrophe.
It does seem, but Keir Starmer was saying that there's no reason why we can't have both, though. So we could have a relationship with Europe in some sort of better form than we have currently, and also have that relationship with the States. And surely Donald Trump, he's a businessman. I don't think he would be upset about that. He would expect it, surely.
Well, I think that's cloud cuckoo land, to be honest.
Really?
Because the visions are so very disparate. It's really, choosing either to go forward, embrace a resurgent America under Trump, or remain shackled to an EU, Nana, frankly, that's swiftly spiraling into irrelevance and chaos. And I don't think you can bridge the gap and do both at the same time.
Now, what about the Riviera of the Middle East? Donald Trump's view on Gaza. You've got about a minute left, Lee.
Well, what about that? It's certainly a very bold plan. What about it? We don't know all the details yet, but it certainly rattled the cages of all the right places and ruffled all the right feathers. Donald Trump has made paradises out of deserts before. Who's to say he couldn't do it again in Gaza?
Well, I'm sure he could, but then did you get the impression that it meant the people of Gaza could return?
Well, I think that the president's wish list, of course, is for states like Egypt to take them. One can understand why they wouldn't want to accept the Palestinians, but certainly we wouldn't want to see them being exported to the West, and I understand.
Well, the thing is, though, is whether they can go back. Listen, Lee Cohen, I could talk to you forever, but unfortunately, I'm running out of time. Lovely to talk to you. That is Lee Cohen. This is GB News. Next, Foreign Secretary David Lammy has urged his European counterparts to stop people smuggling gangs. Do you trust Labour on that? First, let's get some weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest weather forecast for GB News. Stays cloudy through the rest of the weekend for many. Further outbreaks of rain and snow in places too, and cold for many of us. Just something a little milder across the far west. High pressure keeping the Atlantic warmth from moving in. Cold southeasterly breeze across the UK. And this weather front giving outbreaks of rain and snow in places too. A few centimetres possible across parts of East Anglia down into southeast England, perhaps Lincolnshire as well. But it should turn turn back to rain as we head into the early hours, and generally a cloudy night to come for many. Further patchy light rain in places, perhaps a little hill snow over the highest ground across the north and the west. Temperatures close to freezing for many, just something a little milder across the far southwest of England, with some brighter spells to start Sunday. These confined to the far south and north of the UK, so there could be some glimmers of sunshine across coastal stretches of the Highlands into the Western Isles as well, but the east cloudy with wintry showers. Cloudy across Northern Ireland, Northern England as well, with patchy rain, some hill fog, murky conditions, a chilly start for many. Some glimmers of sunshine for western parts of Wales down into the West Country, but even here there'll still be a lot of cloud around, damp towards the east and southeast, and there'll be little change as we go through Sunday. We're still drawing in east to southeasterly winds, keeping a lot of cloud across the UK, some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle, some snow across the high ground across the north as well, some patchy rain across parts of Northern Ireland, and temperatures still chilly for many, 4 to 6 degrees, just a little milder again towards the far west southwest, of highs around 9 to 11 Celsius possible here. As we go through the evening time, still a lot of cloud around. Any clear spells, temperatures will drop away, some icy stretches possible, some frost, and it stays very similar Monday and Tuesday. A lot of cloud around, still on the chilly side, but turning much milder by Wednesday.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you not one, but 2 chances to win this month, with 2 prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's just coming up to 5 o'clock. Welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel, although I know there is somebody who keeps writing in saying, say my panel and I. No, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting in the headlines right now. You know who you are. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me for the next hour, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, and also political commentator Lynn May. In my niggle, I took on Rachel Reeves following reports that she was investigated over her expenses whilst working for the Bank of England. Of course, every time her lot of every question they come up with this one, fixing the foundations.
We change our plan, not changing the conversation. Change and reform are coming. Fixing the foundations.
That's why we are fixing the foundations to better support our public finances. At my first budget in October, it was my duty as Chancellor to fix the foundations of our economy.
It's time to fix those two in the flaming foundations, for goodness sake. So what do you think? Should Rachel go? If you missed my niggle, you can catch it on gbnews.com and our YouTube channel. And also, why not go online and vote in our poll? Meanwhile, Foreign Secretary David Lammy has been to European countries and has said that they should do more to smash the people smuggling gangs as he meets the counterparts at the Munich Security Conference. So what do you think? Do you trust Labour to smash the gangs? Then US President J.D. Vance has blasted the UK and Europe over protest laws and immigration policies.
And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
I'm so jealous of the Americans. J.D. Vance, great politician. Donald Trump, and what have we got? So do you think there's a retreat of free speech in Britain? But before we get started, let's get your latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Nana, thank you. It's just gone 5 o'clock. These are your headlines. David Lammy has said the UK is committed to an irreversible pathway for Ukraine towards NATO membership. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, the Foreign Secretary said NATO membership is the cheapest and best mechanism to secure peace, not just in Europe, but across the Atlantic. He also went on to call for European sanctions on people smuggling gangs and will host a migration roundtable with Italy. He also says he and US Vice President J.D. Vance agree Ukraine must be part of any peace talks with Russia. But the Ukrainian President Zelensky has called for the creation of an army of Europe to guard against Russia.
Thankful to the United States, big donations and big support during 3 years of the war, bipartisan support. And we are very thankful to EU. For us, it's a similar big strategic partner. We are part of Europe, of the continent, and we will be part of EU. And that's why for us, the voice of Europe, EU leader, they helped a lot. That's why we need, in any case, in any diplomacy, in the future, the future is not only the result, the future is the way. And on this way, we have to go shoulder to shoulder with Europeans.
And back in the UK, thousands of people have marched to the US Embassy in London in protest against Donald Trump's plans for Gaza. The protest came after a proposal by the president earlier this month for the United States to consider taking ownership of the Gaza Strip. Mr. Trump suggested the US could redevelop the war-torn territory into the Riviera of the Middle East. The Met Police promised a major security operation to keep the groups apart and minimise disruption. They imposed conditions under the Public Order Act, restricting routes, assembly areas and the start and finish times. In other news, a woman in her 40s has died after a shooting at a village pub in Kent on Valentine's Day. Kent police say she was shot around 7 o'clock on Friday evening and died at the scene. A murder investigation is now underway, with police confirming the suspect is a man known to the victim. Officers have also found a vehicle and a firearm on the Dartford crossing linked to the incident. Elsewhere, the family of British nationals Craig and Lindsay Foreman is rallying to secure their safe return after the couple was detained in Iran. The pair, who were travelling across the world on motorbikes, were arrested in January, with Iranian state media reporting they face security charges. The Foreman's family described the situation as distressing and expressed their focus on ensuring their safety while working with authorities. The Foreign Office is in contact with Iranian officials and providing consular support. 240 migrants have crossed the Channel in small boats today. It comes as overnight one woman died when a boat capsized near the coast of France, while dozens of others were rescued. French Coast Guards confirmed they managed to rescue 69 people in the water near Calais, while one sadly died. In other news, Hamas has released 3 Israeli hostages after days of uncertainty over the Gaza ceasefire. In return, 369 Palestinians held in Israeli jails were released. Hamas had threatened to halt releases, accusing Israel of ceasefire violations, while Israel warned it would resume attacks if hostages weren't freed by midday. The fragile truce remains on edge as both sides trade blame. And Elon Musk has fathered a secret 13th child with a 26-year-old MAGA influencer, according to reports. Ashley St. Clair made the unconfirmed claims in a Valentine's Day post on Musk's social media site X last night. The Conservative commentator explained she had not intended to share the information publicly, but felt she had no choice when it became clear the media intended to do so. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Nana.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, Foreign Secretary David Lammy is urging European countries to do more to smash people smuggling gangs at the Munich Security Conference. Then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do we need a European army? Ukrainian President Zelensky thinks so, so he's called for EU nations to guard against Russia. And so much coming up as well. World War II veteran Fred Jennings in my difficult conversations. It's his special day as he turns 100 years old. I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments. Post them at gbnews.com/Yosef. So David Lammy has said that the UK is committed to an irreversible pathway for Ukraine towards NATO membership, speaking at the Munich Security Conference. The Foreign Secretary said NATO membership is the cheapest and best mechanism to secure peace, not just in Europe, but across the Atlantic. In the meantime, President Zelensky has also called for the creation of an armed forces of Europe. He said that he was thankful for all the support Ukraine has received throughout the last 3 years.
Thankful to the United States, big donations and big support during 3 years of the war, bipartisan support, and we are very thankful to EU. For us, it's a similar big strategic partner. We are part of Europe, of the continent, and we will be part of EU, and that's why for us, the voice of Europe, EU leader, they helped a lot. That's why we need, in any case, in any diplomacy, in the future, yes, the future is not only the result, the future is the way, and on this way we have to go shoulder to shoulder with Europeans.
Well, joining me now is security expert Anthony Glees. Anthony, thank you very much for joining me. So first of all, what do you think? Is Zelensky just saying that because then the words NATO are not being used, but it's a similar thing except for it's a European force, which then he's not really crossing one of Vladimir Putin's red lines, therefore he can join it without any problems at all?
No, I think Zelensky is being very realistic about the options that face us in Europe, with a United States of America led now by Donald Trump, who is increasingly taking the side of Putin, who is our enemy, and trying to undermine the confidence and political integrity of those who ought to be his allies. I'm thinking about Greenland, I'm thinking about Canada, but I'm also thinking about the interference in the German election. We heard that from J.D. Vance in Munich. This has been a defining week for European security. Nothing is going to be the same again. And although neither Trump nor Vance have pulled the plug on the American aspect here, America will continue to be in NATO for the foreseeable future. He has made it very clear that European security has to be the business of Europeans, and that America is no longer going to regard the eastern border of Western Europe as the border with the United States, but it's going to be the eastern border of America that is the American border. So this is a real reversal of 70 years of strategic thinking. And what Zelensky is proposing makes perfect sense to me. And I hope that European statesmen will have the gumption, I believe they do now, to act together to ensure that we can keep Western Europe safe from Russia and the European NATO nations safe from Russia without the direct intervention of the Americans. And yes, this is feasible.
Anthony, why do you say that President Trump is taking Putin's side? If somebody starts a war, which is ultimately what Putin did, and is firing rockets repeatedly, is there a problem with Donald Trump going to speak to that person directly and saying, hey, what are you doing that for? Or let's talk about why you're firing those missiles. I would actually look on that and think that he is wise to speak to him before Zelensky, because Putin is the aggressor.
Well, I think you're absolutely right with that point. I mean, the Vice President of the United States of America, J.D. Vance, who appears to know very little about European history, came and lectured the people of Europe, and they had to, the leaders of Europe, they had to sit there and listen to him saying things that to many people were really just off the wall. Now, perhaps it is Donald Trump and Vice President Vance's turn to hear from us about what we think is right. And we believe in sovereignty. Whether you voted for Brexit or you didn't vote for Brexit, whether you're in favour of the European Union or not, we all believe in sovereignty. We all believe that nation states should be allowed to work out their own destinies as the people in those countries see fit. By talking for 90 minutes to Putin without including Zelensky, without even speaking to Zelensky first, Trump gave every impression that he saw this as a deal to be done between two strong men, rather than making a peace where one country has, without any doubt at all, been the aggressor. We feel this very strongly here in the United Kingdom because we know in our folk memory what it means to be up against an autocratic dictator armed to the teeth who wants to attack this country. In 1939 and 1940, we stood alone, and in the end, we won. And Ukraine stood alone, but now we're part of that fight, and we're up to it to our eyeballs here in the United Kingdom because we feel very strongly that you cannot interfere with the sovereignty of a state. If Putin were to get the peace he wanted, Ukraine would be finished as a sovereign state. It would lose territory.
So far, though, so far, none of our tactics have worked. Nothing we've done has worked. So somebody coming in with a different approach, I think, is absolutely what's needed. And ultimately, if we carried on with the tactic that we're using, which is just keep fighting fire with fire and fighting back, there'll be nothing left and nobody left. So surely Donald Trump speaking for 90 minutes to Putin, he's literally the only one that Putin will speak to for that kind of time, going in and having a word with him. We don't know the full contents of what was said. And then maybe speaking to Zelensky as well afterwards doesn't mean that he's negotiating the future of Ukraine, but it means that he's trying to create some form of peace. And I think his tactics are the right ones. And I think Europe, we've given their example of what we are going to do. And it's not really amounted to much. It was made no difference. People are dying.
I'm sorry to have to disagree with you because I think sovereignty is a really important issue here. Territory is quite important, but it's sovereignty because Trump has conceded the most important points that Putin wanted, namely that Ukraine should never be allowed to join NATO and Ukraine must give up territory that the Russians have conquered by force of arms, unleashing a terrible war on the brave people of Ukraine. And it's not true that Putin has won this war. Smirking Putin wants people to think Russia has won. He's lost, we think, almost 1 million men in dead and those wounded in this, and he has got about 20% of the territory of Ukraine. But he couldn't take Ukraine out in a matter of days as he wanted. And what Trump is doing is giving him a win. And that means not just that it spells disaster for Ukraine because it loses its sovereignty, but it also spells disaster for any other state in Europe that Putin thinks he's got a right to control.
Well,
we cannot let Trump. We can't let
but
Trump
that's kind
do
of
that.
circumspect. It doesn't necessarily mean that at all. And I don't know whether it will be seen as a win for him, but I think there needs to be some sort of feeling that somebody has won something and somehow there's got to stop the war. So we either lead with pride and say, no, let me just get to the point. We either lead with pride on this and people carry on dying and the war just carries on and everyone starts paying a fortune. I don't want to carry on funding the war. I'm sick of it. Donald Trump doesn't want to get involved in this war anymore and Zelensky probably wants it to stop. Putin wants to save face. He's gone into something that didn't go the way he planned it. So somehow each person within that deal has to feel they've won something for it to end. Look, I've got to go because I've got to bring in my panel, Anthony, but it's such a pleasure talking to you. We will do this again. Thank you very much.
Appeasement never works, Nana.
We're not appeasing.
Ever works.
We're being realistic here because fighting fire with fire, constant fire, means everyone is on fire. Anthony, thank you very much. He's a security expert. Well, joining me now for more, my panel, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, also political commentator Lynn May. Lynn May, I start with you. Fighting fire with fire. I don't think, in the end, at some point, somebody's got to chuck some water on fire.
No, I completely agree with you. And I don't think there is an appetite from the British people to continue to fund this war. As basic as asking the average person what is their connection to Ukraine, it will probably be none. And I think Trump is right with this. This whole idea that, you know, if we do not support Ukraine indefinitely, they're going to come and take over the rest of Europe. No. NATO member states, if Article 5 needs to be triggered because they hit a NATO member, then defence will be triggered and we will be protected, we'll protect each other. This whole idea that if we do not...
I don't believe they will, though.
You don't believe what?
I don't believe NATO will come in and step in and help if something goes wrong. Do you remember when there was that missile that we thought may have been fired by Vladimir Putin, which landed in Poland, but then it turned out that actually it was some backfiring Ukrainian missile or a shell or something, and everyone was very, very calm before anybody did anything, which I thought was the right thing.
Yes.
But I sensed a level of trepidation at even the thought and prospect that we would all come together and fight.
We have to be careful. NATO is huge. And if the last time that it was triggered, I think the only time it's been triggered was because of 9/11. So we can't just, as soon as something happens, there has to be an assurity to say this is a huge occurrence that's happened on one of our NATO members, then we act.
I don't believe they will. I don't believe they will. They'll look at their own. They'll look at their own interests. They'll look at their own interests and then go, "Ooh, do you know what? We're not going to do as much as we said we were going to do." Just like the Budapest Memorandum, which was signed by Russia, ironically, and then when it came to the crunch.
Do you think Putin wants Britain? Do you think Putin wants Britain?
I've seen a video of them actually.
Oh,
sorry, hang on, let me finish. I haven't answered the question, and you already think you know what I'm going to say. I've actually seen a video of them showing this. One of the TV presenters saying, "Oh, United Kingdom," and actually showing a nuclear weapon blowing us up and everything. I don't think he wants Britain. I think that I don't think that we'd be missed. Aaron Bastani.
I think if Putin has designs on anywhere, it seems to be the Baltics. So if I was Lithuanian and Estonian, I'd probably be quite worried. Lithuania has a pretty large Russian minority. Poland might be quite worried. I think, again, with justification, obviously you've got Moldova and Transnistria. So there are lots of border disputes relevant for Europe. In terms of who is a NATO member of those countries I just mentioned, the Baltics is the big one. I think you're both right. So on the one hand, Ukraine is this weird grey area, which wasn't a NATO member. We cannot commit ourselves to a global existential war for a country which is not in NATO. That's not part of the plan that anybody has signed up to. At the same time, of course, Lithuania, Estonia, etc., are in NATO. But I also think you're right. If they were invaded, I don't think we would do very much.
Well, if Poland wasn't actually invaded...
No, if Poland was, yes, but if
they're a
the
NATO
Baltics...
member.
No, I'm saying... But if Lithuania was, which is probably the most likely candidate, I don't think the United States and Britain and France and Germany are going to enter an existential war for Lithuania. Now, in 1939, Britain did for Poland, so maybe... But I think on the balance of probability, I think you're probably right. And in terms of what happens next with this conflict, you're both right to say there is zero consent for people in this country to send young men and women to go fight and die in a ditch, you know, by the River Don or the River Dnieper. Nobody wants to do that. However, you go further east, there are young Poles that feel that way. There are Estonians, there are Finns. So we're much bigger in Europe than Russia. 450 million people, 150 million. We're much wealthier. The point is they're one country. Europe is very divided.
I don't, even with young people in those regions, I don't think, when you look at Ukrainians, they don't have an appetite either. Even if we look at the polls recently, only 11% of young people, Gen Z, are willing to fight.
Well, they say that now.
So even if we should start an army, we don't want
now,
to.
But they may have to.
They won't. They'll rather go to prison.
No, I don't think they will. I think they would fight in the end.
No, I don't think so.
I think they would in the end if you threatened to take away their iPhones. It works with my daughter. She'll do whatever I say. Right, Lynn May, thank you very much. Aaron Bastadi. Next, it is Difficult Conversations, where I'll be hearing from World War II veteran Fred Jennings as he turns 100 years old.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, after moving to the UK from Kochi in Japan over 25 years ago, our next guest missed the taste of home and started making sushi with local ingredients.
Yes, Tomono Davies went on to establish Tomono Sushi Party, inspired by her mother's dedication to cooking fresh meals every day.
Now, while sushi is usually enjoyed in restaurants in Japan, Tomono is showing that anyone can create it at home. So here we go. She's already taught over 500 people and is now bringing her passion to even more people.
So she joins us now in the studio to give us one of her sushi masterclasses. First of all, we're a little bit nervous. We're certainly not pros. I love eating sushi, but certainly not making it.
As long as you follow my instruction, it should be that easy.
OK, great. That's what we like to hear.
So tell us a little bit about your business and why we're here today.
Of course. So my name is Tomono Davies. I'm originally from the place called Kochi, as you mentioned, and I'm the founder and the owner of Tomono Sushi Party. So we bring authentic, hands-on sushi making classes to homes, offices in London and home counties. Also, we run public classes, the information which you can find on my website.
Yep.
So this goes all the way back in 90s, actually, when I was a student.
Never.
The Japanese food wasn't widely available, but I really craved a beautiful, you know, aromatic aged sushi, Japanese food. And when you're craving something, you started making your own at home. And I fell in love with the Englishman. He brought me back to UK. Then that's the time more people start asking me, can you teach me how to make sushi?
The People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, you've missed most of the show. So next time, get here at 3. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 25 minutes after 5 o'clock. Now, this is such a lovely story. A true hero gets the tribute he deserves. It's World War II veteran Fred Jennings is being treated to a special RAF flypast as he turns 100 years old. GB News reporter Doogie Peters spoke with Fred for us ahead of his special day.
Fred, how did you manage to make it 100? What's your secret?
I'm going to give you the answer that I gave even at the GP. I should be asking you that question. The GP, he just laughed.
Fred, you've seen quite a lot in your lifetime, including action in the Second World War. I mean, tell us a little bit about what you were based on.
Well, a major incident, I suppose, the squadron I was on, the Dutch squadron, we were using Melsbrook in Belgium. It was the first New Year's Day of 1945. And a very early operation, but I came out of the radar shack, which was quite near the dispersals, and saw in the distance to the east about 5 single-engine fighters. I assumed at the time, quite wrongly, that they were Spitfires. Well, immediately following that was a whole 5 open fire with air-to-ground cannon shells. There were 5 Focke-Wulf 190s. Luckily, I was outside the shack, and right beside us was a unfilled bomb crater from the Allied bombing. And I was able to jump into that, and with cannon shells thudding into the ground, joined by my working mate, a Canadian airman. And needless to say, we escaped, and the firing continued. But after a while it stopped, but because a number of Spitfires arrived coming back from somewhere, and they mutilated us in a low-level dogfight. And that was quite exciting while it lasted.
You're obviously claimed by Northern Ireland, but not from Northern Ireland.
Well,
what made you move here? Was it love?
Well, when I left the RAF, I got a job with what was known as the Ministry of Civil Aviation in London. And we were importing mobile radars from America. And they had to be prepared and serviced and got to operational use. And after we'd got one really well going, I was handed a paper which said, "You have to take this unit to Nuts Corner." And I said, "Where's Nuts Corner?" And he said, "I don't know, somewhere near Birmingham." Anyway, we moved this beautiful piece of radar to Nuts Corner. The radar itself was capable of both talk down and search. In other words, you could identify the aircraft up to about 30 miles away and then maneuver it onto the final approach, and it was talked down by an air traffic man.
Well, Fred, happy birthday.
That's very kind of you.
And may you have many more, and I do mean that.
Oh, bless him. But would our young people want to fight in war? Joining me now, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, and political commentator Lynn May. So, Lynn May, you're shaking your head already. You don't think they would?
No. That era was completely different. Firstly, the opportunity to go and fight for your country was heroic. You know, the ladies would love it, your family would cheer you on. There wasn't an array of opportunity aside from that. So, of course, people grabbed the idea of, you know, fighting for your country. Also, masculinity was very aligned with going off to war. Now, I just don't think there's a hunger for that. We see how our veterans are treated after they come back from war in terms of housing, care, support. Like I said previously, only 11% of Gen Z would actually fight for Britain. And you can understand why. They're watching in real time war play out in front of them online, where people are blown to smithereens. And what happens to that? What happens to them after? What happens to their families after?
Do you think that what the point is that they've not seen any sort of real war or any action, or not needed to even consider it? There's been literally a sense of peacetime for many decades.
Yeah,
and they haven't seen that. I'm going to just come to Aaron Bastani, because we're going to go to the news. Aaron Bastani.
I think that's all true, but I would also add on top of that young people, let's say if you're in your early 30s, they've grown up in an era where the British Army's only really been involved in stupid, pointless, avoidable wars which have backfired. So I think, you know, in terms of recruitment, why would you join the British Army when, in recent memory, you've got Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, World War II, of course, very different. And I think that's a major problem as well.
Do you think immigration has something to do with this as well? That the cultural shift, that people are no longer patriotic about their country, and you're almost demonised if you are. So anything that sort of alludes to that, young people just aren't interested anymore.
Yes and no. I mean, in the US Army, for instance, there are a ton of Mexicans who go there and they see it as an opportunity to earn a good living and to integrate and to effectively make a trade. So I'm not quite sure if that's the case. We obviously have a very different military to the US, but I think all the stuff that Lin May was saying in terms of the culture is true, but also look at the people that have come back from Afghanistan, the sacrifices they made, and for what? 20 years later, the Taliban are back in charge anyway. There are people in our towns and cities with arms and legs missing, they can't see. For what? Because of the stupidity of our politicians. I can understand why a young person sees that and says, not for me.
I think a lot of men are soft as well, versus back then.
But when you say soft, I mean, is it really hard to go to war, or is it just a bit...
Well, yeah, you have to have a hardened approach to want to fight, even though it's not always combat.
Do you think they've been emasculated with all of this sort of woke nonsense?
Yeah, if you look at... there was an interesting video on how people are being raised, and years ago you would have a father say, oh, did Billy hit you at school? Next time, wallop him one back. Now it's like, you know, your feelings, how did that make you
feel? What's wrong with that, though?
I didn't say there's anything wrong with it, but it's not a good premise to start if you want to send people to war. You know, they're not going to be sitting down on the front line saying, OK, well, how do you feel about that? You need to go in there with... You can see some of the Russians...
You're going to use the words that Donald Trump used, man up. Probably get in trouble for that. You see, that's the problem she's saying. Well, stay with us. Loads more still to come. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Next up, there we are, still talking war and armies. Do you think that we need a European army? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Aaron Bastani and Lin May. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Nana, thank you. Your headlines at 5:32. David Lammy has said the UK is committed to an irreversible pathway for Ukraine towards NATO membership. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, the Foreign Secretary said NATO membership is the cheapest and best mechanism to secure peace, not just in Europe, but across the Atlantic. The UK Foreign Secretary also called for European sanctions on people smuggling gangs and will co-host a migration roundtable with Italy. He also says he and US Vice President J.D. Vance agree Ukraine must be part of any peace talks with Russia. But the Ukrainian President Zelensky has called for the creation of an army of Europe to guard against Russia.
Thankful to the United States, big donations and big support during 3 years of the war, bipartisan support. And we are very thankful to EU. For us, it's a similar big strategic partner. We are part of Europe, of the continent, and we will be part of EU. And that's why for us, the voice of Europe, EU leader, they helped a lot. That's why we need, in any case, in any diplomacy, in the future, yes, the future is not only the result, the future is the way, and on this way we have to go shoulder to shoulder with Europeans.
Back in the UK, thousands of people have marched to the US Embassy in London in protest against Donald Trump's plans for Gaza. The protest came after a proposal by the US president earlier this month for the United States to consider taking ownership of the Gaza Strip. Mr. Trump suggested the US could redevelop the war-torn territory into the Riviera of the Middle East. In other news, a woman in her 40s has died after a shooting at a village pub in Kent on Valentine's Day. Kent police say she was shot around 7 o'clock on Friday evening and died at the scene. A murder investigation is now underway, with police confirming the suspect is a man known to the victim. Officers have also found a vehicle and a firearm on the Dartford crossing linked to the incident. Elsewhere, 240 migrants have crossed the Channel in small boats today. It comes as overnight one woman died when a boat capsized near the coast of France, while dozens others were rescued. French Coast Guards have now confirmed they managed to rescue 69 people in the water near Calais, while one sadly died. And the Queen has met with young people from a charity horse riding club, which she called unique and a very special place, when she attended Ascot today. Queen Camilla met students from Ebony Horse Club, which provides riding lessons and youth work support in South London. The Queen was appointed president of Ebony Horse Club in 2009 when she was a Duchess of Cornwall. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest weather forecast for GB News. Stays cloudy through the rest of the weekend for many. Further outbreaks of rain and snow in places too, and cold for many of us. Just something a little milder across the far west. High pressure keeping the Atlantic warmth from moving in. Cold southeasterly breeze across the UK. And this weather front giving outbreaks of rain and snow in places too. A few centimetres possible across parts of East Anglia down into southeast England, perhaps Lincolnshire as well. But it should turn back to rain as we head into the early hours, and generally a cloudy night to come for many. Further patchy light rain in places, perhaps a little hill snow over the highest ground across the north and the west. Temperatures close to freezing for many, just something a little milder across the far southwest of England, with some brighter spells to start Sunday. These confined to the far south and north of the UK, so there could be some glimmers of sunshine across coastal stretches of the Highlands into the Western Isles as well, but the east cloudy with wintry showers. Cloudy across Northern Ireland, Northern England as well, with patchy rain, some hill fog, murky conditions, a chilly start for many. Some glimmers of sunshine for western parts of Wales down into the West Country, but even here there'll still be a lot of cloud around, damp towards the east and southeast, and there'll be little change as we go through Sunday. We're still drawing in east to southeasterly winds, keeping a lot of cloud across the UK, some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle, some snow across the higher ground across the north as well, some patchy rain across parts of Northern Ireland, and temperatures still chilly for many, 4 to 6 degrees, just a little milder again towards the far west southwest, of highs around 9 to 11 Celsius possible here. As we go through the evening time, still a lot of cloud around. Any clear spells, temperatures will drop away, some icy stretches possible, some frost. And it stays very similar Monday and Tuesday, a lot of cloud around, still on the chilly side, but turning much milder by Wednesday.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, welcome on board. See, Nana Nicey here. 39 minutes after 5 o'clock, 21 minutes to go. I'm Nana Akua. This is live. We are GB News. Let's cross live to Munich as Foreign Secretary David Lammy takes part in town hall meetings with European counterparts on Ukraine.
Then he'll make a deal. So our plan should be to stay the course.
So what do you think? David Lammy, good Foreign Secretary or not? Then in our great British debate, I'm asking, do we need a European army? Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for the creation of an army of Europe to guard against Russia, as he suggested the US may no longer come to his aid. America's Vice President J.D. Vance warned that Europe needed to step up in a big way on defence, undermining Europe as a whole. Let's dip into this conversation.
But on his terms, the question is, how do you get to a deal that everybody can live with? And if it can be done faster, great. But in my mind, to get to it faster, you should prepare for the medium term.
The first time I will disagree with Radek. Putin doesn't want peace. He wants war, because for him war also is an instrument to control his society, to control his country and regions. If we are speaking about true reasons why he wants war.
But if you capitulated, he would have peace, right? So he would prefer not to pay the price.
I'd like to turn to the UK Foreign Secretary. I mean, the UK always likes to say that you have this special relationship with the United States, and through that lens, I'd like to ask you what your plan is right now. Follow Trump, try and build a bridge between the US and the EU, present your own plan?
Let's step back for a moment. It was the US and the UK that 3 years ago presented the global community, because of our shared intelligence capability, with a fact that many in Europe said couldn't happen, wouldn't happen, that Putin was about to invade Ukraine. And I was in Ukraine the month before that invasion, and I remember looking at all the faces of those young men and women in Kyiv who had lost their lives, because this story begins back in 2014. Since then, combined as a transatlantic alliance, we have supplied Ukraine with the military capability, with the humanitarian capability and the economic capability to fend off this war. And the bravery, the courage, the innovation in Ukraine, which often doesn't get talked about, the innovation in drone capability has been phenomenal, given that people said this would be over within a week. So that's what we've achieved. Today, there has been a conversation that our American friends have begun. It's talk about talks. There is no negotiated settlement. We know, our assessment is certainly, that Putin has showed no desire to negotiate other than to see a capitulation from our Ukrainian friend, which is something we cannot tolerate. And neither can our American friends tolerate that, because it would send a message to others, let's say Maduro, that invade Venezuela, to China have your imperial ambitions. And so we have to stand up to Putin. We know that. The truth is, in that negotiation, the question is on what terms, one, and two, what are the security guarantees that ensure that Putin does not come back for more, so that we have an enduring peace? And what we know, and it's a bitter pill, was that Minsk didn't work. He breached the OSCE monitoring exercise 20 times. It didn't work. So something's got to be in its place this time that works, and that's why we believe an irreversible pathway to NATO is important to keep on the table.
Minister Sakaliene, how do you see the first steps to providing Ukraine the security guarantees that it needs, and that would also make you feel comfortable? I mean, Lithuania, everybody talks about how you are also...
So that was David Lammy. I don't know what he was saying. I did try and listen to his answer. I don't think he answered the question, but let's get some reaction from co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, and political commentator Lynn May. Aaron Bastani. your thoughts? There's David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, answering or sort of non-answering the question.
Yeah, it was all very Hollywood, wasn't it? Maybe I misheard. It sounded like she was asking him a very specific question about the role of the UK. Obviously, historically, we've been this bridge between Europe and the US. And
she was, yeah.
And he sort of goes into some, I don't know,
Like
hope and dreams and Walt Disney.
Emotional grifting is what we call that.
It's like a Disney movie, basically. And it's a very good question, so it's a shame he wasn't giving a good answer. What he did say of substance at the end there was about how Britain still supports Ukraine's application to NATO. This is complete fantasy.
Completely.
If the United States doesn't want to fund and guarantee European collective security anymore, which is what J.D. Vance said, that's a fact, not my opinion, that's what he said, then the idea that Ukraine can join NATO is a dead letter. The real conversation is how does Europe guarantee its own security without NATO? It doesn't mean you get rid of NATO, but that's literally the terms of the debate which America is now setting.
So would that be why Zelensky is calling for a European army?
I think also there just does need to be a conversation about, in the eventuality, there isn't a NATO, because the US is the biggest contributor to NATO. And as we've heard time and time again recently from Trump, he is quite angry with Europe, and he doesn't see why they have to pay so much. And I wouldn't be surprised with how he's been recently. He could pull the plug on their funding. So there does need to be a real conversation about, OK, what does the security for Europe look like without NATO, possibly?
Well, Donald Trump was really saying that they should contribute the amount that was agreed of GDP, which many of them weren't. And people deliberately, I think, misinterpreted that he's going to leave NATO and blah, 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 which wasn't what he said. He said that if they don't pay up, then America are not going to take up the slack and come back in their defence and help them out, which I think is fair enough. I think that President Trump has a point with regard to NATO. People need to pay up. He's asking for 5% of GDP. People should pay up if they want the support of the Americans. And I think it's fair enough. If people don't want that, then Zelensky is saying that we should have a European army. Do you think that's a way forward, a European army?
I think he's going to say that because it benefits him right now. I don't personally think that we should have a European army. We do need to discuss some sort of defence, but in terms of boots on the ground to support NATO, he's Ukraine. He's only talking about it because of what he's faced with at the moment.
Armstrong, final word. You've got about 10 seconds. Should we have a European army?
I think we probably do need some kind of integrated European army. I think it's crazy that Britain has aircraft carriers basically designed for war in the Pacific when we can't even guarantee defence in Europe. I think that's kind of mental, actually.
Well, I'll tell you where I am. I'd like us to have our own army. I mean, have you seen the state of it? Frankly, if we could just get that straight, then maybe we can consider creating one in Europe as well. But it's time for the debate. What do you think? Do we need a European army? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky seems to think so. What do you think? gbnews.com/your say. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast of some of the top European holiday destinations.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Heavy showers and thunderstorms affecting the Adriatic and Ionian Sea coastlines, and this could also bring a risk of snow to Croatia. This will be through Saturday and also into Sunday, where low pressure largely dominates. But as we head further west across the Mediterranean, it should be largely settled, bar a little bit of cloud and perhaps the risk of the odd shower across Portugal and northwestern Spain. But Madeira and Tenerife largely settled, and it remains largely settled into next week, with temperatures widely in the mid-teens.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's also about how children are taught to behave towards people who claim that they have a different gender to their biological sex. And what I'm really concerned about is particularly girls being told that they shouldn't challenge, say, a man in their changing rooms or a boy in their toilets because that is unkind. Joanne, do you think that's actually setting up girls to put themselves in danger for the so-called purpose of being kind?
Again, what you're doing here is you're using these very obtuse type comments to try and paint trans people as some sort of predators and going
I'm
into
trying to
changing
say
rooms.
that there's a reason that we have single-sex spaces, and if girls are socially conditioned not to uphold those single-sex spaces, we are going to have a huge safeguarding challenge.
So it's important that the education we're providing around gender identity, even non-trans people, about understanding your sense of self, I think is really important. I think schools today are doing a far better job than they did when I was younger in the 60s. So I'm not an education profession specialist in this area, but I would advocate that education needs to represent the real world, and trans people are in the real world. If it means making girls more aware of their own sense of self, empowering them, giving them, working with them to
Helen,
so they can
how is
understand
this
threats, then
empowering
that's important.
girls?
Say again?
I just said, moving on to Helen, how is this empowering girls?
This language of empowerment is not the right starting point when you're talking with children. Adults and children have totally different duties and responsibilities and rights and needs. In schools, it's up to the grown-ups to set rules that keep everybody safe. It's not possible to keep everybody safe if you pretend that some boys can be girls and some girls can be boys. That doesn't mean being mean or unkind.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
So good afternoon. It is time for the quickfire quiz, the part of the show where I test my panel on some of the other stories hitting the headlines right now. So joining me, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Aaron, your buzzer, please. And also political commentator Lynn May. Your buzzer, please, Lynn May. Right. Question one. Why did a woman visit a New York jail on her 104th birthday? Was it A, she was a former prison officer visiting her workplace, B, she wanted to experience jail for the first time, or C, she was arrested, I'll start it off finished, for a minor offence as part of her birthday prank? Press your buzzer quickly. She did. Lynn May. B. Aaron Bastani?
No idea.
Just press your buzzer and just say one.
A.
All right, the answer is, you might be right, you never know. No, it's B, she was right. She wanted to experience jail for the first time. Question two, true or false? James Howells has won a legal case allowing him to dig for his lost Bitcoin in a landfill site. Oh, Aaron Bastani.
False.
Lynn May? False. You should have said true just in case. It is false, though his legal case was dismissed, and he is now considering buying the landfill site himself in search of $800 million. That's what it was worth. Question three, closest answer wins. How much did the economy grow? Final last quarter. I'll start us off. Finish. Press your buzzers now. In May.
0.5.
0.1%.
0.5 is a bit of a dream. 0.1.
I was going to say, Rachel Reeves, I like that.
She wishes. I hardly think so. Open question. What were some of the specific items that Rachel Reeves was accused of purchasing with expenses, company expenses? Press your buzzers. I've finished, yes?
Luxury items. Gifts.
Aaron Bastani, press your buzzer if you have an answer.
Dinner.
It was allegedly expenses to buy a £152 handbag, perfume, jewellery, wine, and lavish dinners. I will give you that, Lynn May. It's 2-2. Final question, the decider. Question 5. At the Munich Security Conference, and only press your buzzer when I've... No, not now. J.D. Vance said the biggest threat to Europe was it A, Russia, B, China, or C, European governments? Press your buzzers. Aaron Bastani.
C.
Which was European governments, Lynn May?
Same.
If you'd pressed your buzzer in the right time, you'd have got...
I did!
3-2 to Aaron Bastani. You're absolutely right. It's the European governments. Well done at home. Now, listen, for the Great British Debate this hour, I've been asking, do you trust Labour to smash the gangs? Well, according to the GB News poll, 1% of you said yes. 99% of you said no. No surprises there. I'm surprised. The only surprise is it was not 100.
100%, yeah.
OK, well, thank you so much to my panel, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, and also political commentator Lynn May for joining me today. And as ever, thank you to you at home for your company. I look forward to seeing you same time, same place tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Be there, be square. I'll leave you with the weather. Up next, it's the Saturday 5.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest weather forecast for GB News. Stays cloudy through the rest of the weekend for many. Further outbreaks of rain and snow in places too, and cold for many of us. Just something a little milder across the far west. High pressure keeping the Atlantic warmth from moving in. Cold southeasterly breeze across the UK. And this weather front giving outbreaks of rain and snow in places too. A few centimetres possible across parts of East Anglia, down into southeast England, perhaps Lincolnshire as well. But it should turn back to rain as we head into the early hours, and generally a cloudy night to come for many. Further patchy light rain in places, perhaps a little hill snow over the highest ground across the north and the west. Temperatures close to freezing for many, just something a little milder across the far southwest of England, with some brighter spells to start Sunday. These confined to the far south and north of the UK, so there could be some glimmers of sunshine across coastal stretches of the Highlands into the Western Isles as well, but the east cloudy with wintry showers. Cloudy across Northern Ireland, Northern England as well, with patchy rain, some hill fog, murky conditions, a chilly start for many. Some glimmers of sunshine for western parts of Wales down into the West Country, but even here there'll still be a lot of cloud around, damp towards the east and southeast, and there'll be little change as we go through Sunday. We're still drawing in east to southeasterly winds, keeping a lot of cloud across the UK, some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle, some snow across the higher ground across the north as well, some patchy rain across parts of Northern Ireland, and temperatures still chilly for many, 4 to 6 degrees, just a little milder again towards the far west southwest, of highs around 9 to 11 Celsius possible here. As we go through the evening time, still a lot of cloud around. Any clear spells, temperatures will drop away, some icy stretches possible, some frost, and it stays very similar Monday and Tuesday. A lot of cloud around, still on the chilly side, but turning much milder by Wednesday.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be one of 2 lucky Great British